Hello everyone, welcome to What If Deku Had Powers of Alastor and Became the Radio Demon Hero Part 2. Before we start, please go support KimDog2 for writing that awesome fanfic. Battle Trials. If one were to say they were in UA's advanced hero course, then those listening would likely assume that it was involved non-stop hero work and training from the first bell to the last, as the teachers tried to hammer in as much hero knowledge into their students' head as they could. However, that wasn't the case for the students, as every morning the students went through subjects that every other high school student would, from math to history. Which is why Class 1A spent the first few hours going over the lesson plans and syllabus for their non-hero courses, and even getting in the first of some of their lessons. This went on until noon, where the students were dismissed for lunch, and afterwards their hero training would begin. Currently Izuku was sitting with Cherry, Tokoyami, and Pira. So any ideas on what we'll start with? Pira asked, just as curious as the rest of her classmates as to what advanced hero courses are like. Well, whatever it is, it's bound to entertaining at the very least. Izuku answered, with Tokoyami nodding in agreement with his new friend, the two having struck up a quick friendship after talking yesterday. Indeed, whatever trials we face will certainly push us to our limits. Fumikage spoke in a unique manner that the class was slowly growing used to. When they were almost done with their food, that Cherry noticed the three students from across the hall glaring at them, or to be more precise, Izuku. Hey Izu, the scrubs look familiar to you? Cherry asked as Izuku looked over and grinned when he saw who it was. I do believe I recognize two of them from the test site, he told his classmate as he recognized the blue hair and glasses of Tenya Ida glaring at him, as well as a rather feminine-looking boy with spiky blonde hair and indigo eyes. As for the third one, never seen him before in my life, he said as their gazes shifted towards the third one glaring. He had blonde hair and blue eyes as well, and he was glaring murderously while looking to be muttering something under his breath. The group stared at the third for a few more seconds before shrugging and turning their attention back at the other two. Well, if they're here, they must have passed the B course exam, Pira said, happy that their dreams to become weren't complete gone yet. Doesn't explain why they have chosen to glare at Midoriya. Fumiac spoke while glaring back, with Cherry just scoffing. Isn't it obvious, Fumi? They're just pissed that they got stuck in B class. They ran their mouths, dismissed something as useless, and paid the price. Besides, if they're that quick to judge, there's no way they would have lasted in a class. Cherry dismissed with the rest of the group, even the ever-friendly Pira agreeing with her statements. Soon lunch came to the end, and as students headed back to their classes, none were more eager than Class 1A, for it was finally time for their hero training to begin. Line break. 1A was silent as they waited for their teacher to arrive, but if someone looked into the class, it was obvious everyone was shaking with excitement, with most of the class looking ready to explode until everyone's eyes widened as they all recognized, especially as Izuku, whose smile threatened to split his face into two, and his eyes started to grow incredibly bright, and it only got brighter as the man himself entered. Coming the door like a normal person, Almight shouted as the door busted open, revealing Almight in all his glory, posing in a grand posture. The class erupted into conversations as Almight strutted up to the podium, ranging from that he was actually a teacher here to the fact he was in his Sliver Age costume. All chatter died as he reached the podium and stared at his new class signature smile still in place. Welcome to Heroics 101. Here you'll learn all you'll need to perform the tasks that heroes face every day. Almight began his speech, with the entire class holding on to his every word. And the best way I can think to do that is to throw you right into it. So for your first hero class, you rookies will be taking part in battle trials. He finished, holding up a card with the word battle on it as the class erupted into cheers. And to do that, you've got to look the part. The hero continued as briefcases erupted out of the wall, each numbered for a student. These are your costumes that were made based on the designs you submitted after being accepted here. Now hurry and change before heading to ground beta, where the test will be held. All Might ordered before laughing as the class stampeded over each other, not willing to wait any longer. Line break. They say clothes make the man, and that's certainly true for heroes, so show me what kind of heroes you all intend to be. All Might thought as he waited on ground beta for his class to arrive in their hero costumes. He didn't have to wait long, nor was he disappointed as Class 1A emerged from the tunnel. Now that's what I like to see, different outfits proclaiming different messages from different heroes. All Might said, looking over his class, from Pyrrha in her Spartan-like armor to Psycho's black and white general outfit with a rapier. Just think his death from Akame kill. To even Shinso's homage scarf and mask, and even Strauss' maroon dress. Looking around, All Might noticed one wasn't there yet. Now where is young Midoriya? The pro asked, and before the class could answer they heard the familiar tapping from Izuku's shows. So sorry for being late. Izuku's radio voice rose from the darkness, accompanied as two shining red eyes appeared, causing everyone except All Might, Cherry, Ineza and Hitoshi to take a subconscious step back. Not a problem, young Midoriya. All Might laughed, thought when Izuku finally emerged. He, along with most of the class, eyes widened as they finally saw Izuku's hero costume. Izuku appeared greatly amused by the gaping expressions on most of his class and All Might's face. Something wrong? He asked, sounding just as amused as he looked, which caused All Might to snap out of his funk while clearing his throat. Great, now that we're all here I'll explain what we will be doing. The teacher continued, getting the attention of the rest of the class. There will be 2 teams consisting of 2 members. One team will be heroes, the other will be villains. The teams will be randomly formed and pitted against each other. Now then, here's the scenario. Villains have placed a bomb in preparation, and the heroes have very little time to stop them. The villain team will go in 5 minutes to prepare for the heroes, and when those 5 minutes are up, the hero team will have 15 minutes to secure the bomb. For the heroes to win, they must either capture the villains or touch the bomb, and for the villains to win, they must either capture the heroes or keep the bomb out of the heroes' grasp for the 15 minutes. All Might explained while inwardly breathing a sigh of relief. He was able to memorize everything before the class started. Now then, any questions? Several hands went up, and All Might inwardly gulped so many before pointing at Pyrrha. Yes, you young Nikos? Sir, will the bomb be filled with anything, or will it be an empty husk? She asked, putting her hand down. The bomb will be hollow. That way those with less physical abilities will be able to handle the bomb just as easily. All Might assured, while said less than physical students let out a sigh of relief. Next. All Might said while pointing to Cherry. Yeah, so how destructive can we get when it comes to the environment? She asked, since she had one of the more destructive quirks in the class. All Might let out a laugh. Not to worry, we've got the most advanced construction droids here. They could repair one of these buildings in seconds. All Might said, causing Cherry to gain a maniacal grin on her face, causing All Might to sweat drop. Though keep in mind that this is training for later in life, so maybe try and hold back a little. All Might suggested. The next question came from Shoji. Will the villains be able to move the bomb once the trail begins, or will it be stuck wherever we plant it down? The tentacle-armed teen asked, with the number 1 hero nodding. Yes, moving the bomb is completely legal, though keep in mind it may prove to be counterproductive. All Might warned, with Shoji nodding in thanks. Setsuna asked her question asked. You talked about capturing before. Can one escape after they've been captured, or are they stuck for the rest of the trail? Begrinet asked, wanting to know all the possible options. There is no escape once captured. You never know if you'll get a chance to escape in a real scenario, so you'll need to lean to try your best to avoid it. All Might explained, with Setsuna humming in understanding. And finally, young Midoriya. All Might addressed the young man he recognized from all those months ago, and from all the stories young Bakuga had shared with him during their 10 months of training. Is there any way to set the bombs off early? He asked, causing the class to look at him. I mean, who's to say that the villains aren't suicidal and looking to take out some heroes with them? It's happened multiple times before. Izuku explained, with the class understanding his reason before facing All Might, who was shaking his head no. I'm afraid not. The rules are as I have stated before, and victory can only be gained by what I've already explained. All Might told his class, with Izuku shrugging. Fair enough. With all the questions out of the way, All Might grinned. Now then, let's pick our teams. Team A, Setsuna Tokage and Marijane Strauss. Team B, Momo Yayorozu and Tsuyu Azuri. Team C, Kagura Mikazuchi and Saiko Intelli. Team B, Izuku Midoriya and Itsuka Kendo. Team E, Shoto Todoroki and Mizo Shoji. Team F, Fumikage Tokoyami and Edward Elric. Team G, Sai Shimura and Hitoshi Shinso. Team H, Pyrrha Nikos and Cherry Bomb. Team I, Inesa Yarashi and Ryuko Matoi. Team J Mina Ashido and Eijiro Kurashima. With the teams decided, it was time for the fun to begin, and All Might decided to get things started. Now then, the first match will be, he said, reaching into two different boxes. Team H as the heroes versus Team A as the villains. All Might declared, holding a blue ball with AH on it and a red ball with an A. Alright then, villain team, head inside and began preparing. Hero team, stay out here and start planning. I'll let you know when you can begin. The rest of you follow me to the observation room. All Might ordered, with the non-chosen class following. Good luck, Izuku told his friend, who just snorted. Like I need it. Cherry snorted as she watched Izuku follow behind the class before turning to Pira. So are you thinking what I'm thinking? Cherry asked with a raised eyebrow, with Pira just smiling. I think so, Cherry, I think so. Line break. So any ideas on who will win this? Mina asked, eager to see how her classmates fight. Izuku merely laughed. Why, Cherry, of course, he explained with no hesitation or doubt, causing the class to look at him. With her quirk along with Ms. Nikos, they've got this locked down, Izuku explained, with Hitoshi and Inesa nodding in agreement with their friend. Others weren't so convinced. Are you sure? Momo asked with a raised eyebrow. They are going up against one of the stronger teams. Strauss' quirk is easily the strongest of the girls in class, and Tokage's quirk is also very versatile, not to mention she's a recommendation student. I can't see them losing a battle like this easily. Here she put her hands on her hips. Are you sure it's not your friendship with her that's clouding your judgment? She asked, sounding a little accusing. Izuku merely raised any eyebrow. You do make a few good points, but there's one thing you're wrong about, Izuku countered. And that would be? Momo asked, sounding highly skeptical. This isn't a battle, Izuku said, turning back to monitors as the 5 minutes were nearly up. It's a game. Line break. So you ready to do this, Mira? Setsuna asked, with Mira Jane nodding. Their plan was very simple. They had decided to place the bomb at very top floor, just below the roof, where Mary Jane would be left to guard it. Setsuna meanwhile would use her quirk to separate her body, and using the various parts to make sounds to distract them long enough for the time to run out, or for Setsuna, if given the chance, to be able to capture them with the capture tape. Ready. Start. All Might's voice rang out through their earpieces, signaling the start of the trial. Right then, I'll be off. Setsuna nodded and was headed out of the room. Boom. 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 Only to run right back in once the building started to shake violently as loud explosions emerged all over the building. What the hell's going on? Setsuna demanded, only for the wall facing the street to be busted down. It has to be Cherry doing this, Mary Jane shouted over the explosions, and was about to transform when 2 more cherry bombs were seen flying towards them. Don't worry, I can take care of those, no. However, before she could finish, the bombs exploded, resulting in a blinding light, an ear-piercing screech engulfing the girls. A flash grenade? The girls thought, dropping to their knees as they felt something whoosh by them. A few seconds later their eyesight returned, and the ringing in their ears started to fade just in time to hear All Might's voice over the communicator. The hero team wins. Shocked, Mary Jane and Setsuna looked back to see where they had placed the bomb, only to find it gone before looking towards the hole, and saw it was with the hero team, each with a hand on it, with Pira smiling and Cherry smirking. Students, please return to the observation room to review the match while the construction droids rebid the building. All Might ordered before cutting the commutations as Cherry looked up towards the villain team. Well, you heard him. Let's head back and talk about how badly we kicked your ass. Line break. Now then, that was an interesting matching to say the least. All Might said a bit sheepishly, not thinking the match would be a little longer than that. First, the villain team. Although you had a rather thought-out plan, you fell apart when the unknown happened. And instead of trying to avoid conflict and run with the bomb, you tried to stand your ground despite that not being the main objective. All Might told them, with the 2 girls looking down in shame as he moved on to the hero team. Now then, hero team, you did well. You saw that combat would put you at a disadvantage and chose to go about it another way, with Ms. Bomb clearing the path and causing confusion, while also immobilizing your opponents, with Ms. Nikos securing the bomb. All Might explained before placing his hand to his chin in thought. But if I had to choose an MVP, I would have to go with Nikos. Young bomb went a little overboard with explosions and caused unnecessary damage. All Might explained with Cherry shrugging, not bothered at all by it. Meanwhile, Izuku and Momo were having a talk of their own a little bit away from the group. Well, my dear, it seems I was right this time, Izuku commented with Momo stunned at not only who won, but also how they won and how quickly they won. Yes, well, I might have made a few miscalculations, Momo admitted. But I doubt it will happen again with the next trial, Momo said with Izuku humming. You do? He asked with Momo nodding. Yes, I was watching rather closely yesterday and observed everyone's quirks, matching that with the teams and their opponents. I'm confident I can tell who will emerge victorious, Momo said confident, years of private tutoring having her certain she could predict the results the rest of the matches. Izuku let out another Well, then perhaps you would like to continue our little game from earlier, Izuku offered with Momo brow furrowing in confusion before it hit her. Oh, you mean guessing who would win? Well, I suppose, but you should be prepared to soundly defeated, Momo said in a weak attempt to smack talk with Izuku, just raising an amused eyebrow, getting Momo to cough and turn to hide her blush. Let's join the others, the next trial participants are about to be chosen, Momo suggested, trying to get past this embarrassing moment. Lucky for her, Izuku agreed and joined the rest of their classmates. Right, let's choose the participants of the next match, All Might said, reaching in and grabbing a ball from each box. The heroes will be Team F and the villains will be Team E, All Might declared. All right, Edward yelled, ready to go as he turned to his partner. You ready to win this? Ed asked, a cocky grin on his face. Indeed. Tokoyami, hooded with dark shadow, emerged cackling. Hope you're ready to get trounced, it said as it looked towards Todoroki and Shoji. Seeing the teams chosen, Izuku turned to Momo. Well, what do you think? He asked. It's obvious, isn't it? The villain team will be victorious. Shoji is strong on his own, but with Todoroki, the son of the number 2 hero, and his quirk, victory will most assuredly be theirs, Momo said confidently, only to hear Izuku laugh. Oh, and I thought you said you watched the trails closely yesterday. No, the heroes will be the ones to emerge victorious this time, Izuku said, drawing the attention of the rest of the class. Hey, what are you guys talking about over there? Kirishima asked, having noticed the two whispering to each other. Oh, nothing, just going over who would win this round, like we did last time, Izuku told the hardening quirk user. And what are each of your guesses? Kendo asked her partner, as the rest of the class listening in, even All Might, who was also checking to make sure the building was ready, was secretly listening to the conversation. Well, Ms. Yayorozu here guessed that the villain team will win, while I'm betting on the hero team, Izuku said. Ah yeah, we won't let you down, Midoriya, Edward said happily that one of the strongest guys in class had such faith in him. Now then, the building is repaired and everything is ready to go, All Might said. Hero and villain teams move out. Villains, remember you have 5 minutes to prep and prepare, the pros said, getting nods from the two teams as they headed out while getting cheers and good lucks from the rest of their classmates. As the villain team walked on ahead, Tokoyami and Edward were having a talk of their own. So do you have any idea on what we should do? Tokoyami asked, wondering if his teammate had a plan while ignoring his quirk's suggestions of to just pound them. Thankfully, Ed nodded. Yeah, I do. Midoriya and Yayorozu weren't the only ones watching everyone else closely yesterday, and I happened to notice something rather strange about Todoroki, Edward said, turning to Fumikage before smirking. Something that will help us beat him and Shoji. As Edward told Fumikage about what he observed from Todoroki, and just exactly what he had planned, a smile grew on the bird's face as he continued to listen, and with it confidence that they would be able to win. All right, he said after Ed finished explaining his plan. Let's do it. As both teams had left, the students remaining were discussing the upcoming trail. So what do you guys think, heroes or villains for this one? Kirishima asked, having no idea which side would emerge victorious. It will be the heroes, of course, Saiko proclaimed, with Kagura nodding in agreement along with Setsuana, Inesa, Hitoshi and Sai. Mina, however, looked unsure. Are you guys sure? I mean, this is Todoroki we're talking about. He seems pretty strong with that dual quirk of his, the dancer countered, while Setsuna just grinned. Oh, trust us, Ashido, after what I saw yesterday, I can guarantee victory for the heroes, the Dino-loving girl promised. Well, we're about to find out. Izuku commented, his eyes on the monitors as the match had officially begun, and watched as Todoroki ran off on his own, ignoring Shoji's shout to wait, and went straight towards the front door. Izuku only shook his head as he watched the dual-color boy basically line himself up to be defeated. What a fool. Line break. Shoto Todoroki stared coldly at the front door, waiting to freeze it, and his classmates the second it opened, not much mind you, just enough for it to count as a capture, and end this as quickly as the last match ended. This was his first step in becoming a hero and proving to his bastard of a father that he didn't need his damn fire quirk to succeed, and that he would become a hero with just his mother's ice. Technically, yesterday was supposed to be the first step where he would ace the assessment test and come out first. Sadly, that didn't happen, and he had placed around 7th or 8th, with Izuku Midoriya calming the top spot for his own. This wasn't to say he was bitter about it. Sure, he was annoyed, and his father pretty much threw a tantrum when he heard, but Shoto wasn't going to let one small defeat best him. This time I will win, Shoto thought, determined ice beginning to appear and ready to end the game in seconds. Boom. 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 Which is why it came as a shock when something blasted through the air and collided with the wall inches from his head, and Shoto couldn't contain the flinch that escaped him. This wasn't the end of the fire and ice user's problems, though, as a flash of light was his only warning before he suddenly found himself pinned to the wall thanks to pillars emerging from the ground. This has to be Alaric, Shoto thought, with a growl, about to freeze the pillars and escape, when a cry of "Go Dark Shadow!" rang through the air, with the shadow quirk emerging, and before Shoto could even blink, the shadow wrapped the captured tape around the boy's arms and legs. "Shoto Todoroki has been captured, he's out," Almight's voice announced, with the hero team emerging from the doorway, with Ed letting out a cheer. "Alright, I knew that would work," the blonde shouted happily, with Tokoyami nodding. "Indeed, fate smiled upon us, but for now we have to secure victory for ourselves," the avian-headed student reminded Ed, who nodded as both set out looking for Shoji, as Todoroki just hung there in shock. Line break. "They took him out so easily," Momo whispered as she and some of the class watched with wide eyes at how easy he was taken out. "Well, what did you expect? I mean, it was pretty clear he never intended to use his fire," Setsuna countered, with Momo and the rest of those shocked turning towards her, causing her to sigh. "Really, none of you didn't notice how he only seemed to use his ice yesterday when clearly fire would have helped him more?" the splitter asked, with the ones who didn't notice scratched the back of their heads sheepishly. From there, the class watched as the hero team searched for and eventually found Shoji, who was carrying the bomb on his back. Unfortunately, the big guy didn't get a chance to fight back, as Dark Shadow immediately shoot forward and wrapped the capture tape around the muty-armed teen. "The villains have been captured, the hero team wins." Line break. "Now then, who can tell me who the MVP of the match was?" Almight asked once the two teams were back in the monitor room, with Kendo raising her hand. "It was Alaric, sir. He was the one came up with the plan to capture and played a massive part in it, as well as helped capture Shoji as well," Kendo finished, with All Might nodding. "Exactly right. Young Alaric took control of the situation as well as took part in them. A leader in the making," All Might praised, with Edward blushing at the praise. Izuku meanwhile was back to chatting with Momo. "Well, that's 2 for 2, one more and this little contest goes to me," Izuku teased, as Momo was frozen that she was wrong again. Seeing this, Izuku sighed before looking towards All Might, with Momo luckily snapping out of her funk as the hero picked the next matchup. "The heroes will be Team G," the hero announced, with Sai and Hitoshi nodding. "As for the villains, they will be Team C," All Might said, with Saiko smirking, while Kagura narrowed her yes in determination. Momo immediately turned towards Izuku. "Team C, team will emerge victorious this time," the creator almost shouted, sounding a tad bit desperate to be tight. Izuku just hemmed. "I'm betting on Team G," Izuku said as the two teams left. "Oh, are we having a good old battle of the hexes?" Mina asked teasingly, having got caught up in all the fun. Setsuna was all too eager to join in the fun as well. "Yeah, Izuku, you seem awfully dismissive of the girls," she teased, her smile matching Mina's as the class watched the back and forth as Izuku laughed. "Oh, perish the thought, my dears, I just speculating based on what I saw yesterday, and what I know to reach my conclusion," Izuku explained as Momo entered the conversation again as she placed her hands on her hips. "Oh yeah, and what do you see when you look at the girls' team?" she challenged with a raised eyebrow, though she did get a look of concern when Izuku answered. "An implosion waiting to happen," he said before looking towards the monitors. "Why, it's already happening," he said, and once everyone turned to the monitors they saw the two arguing apparently over which plan was better. Well, they might have a rocky start, but they can still turn it around." She tried to argue only for the wall of the room they were in to collapse on top of them. "Or not." Line break. Psycho coughed as she stood up and tried to shake her head clear. "Stupid, you made a stupid, careless mistake," she scolded herself. She and Kagura had wasted their precious 5 minutes arguing over who was in charge and what plan they should use, and it had cost them dearly. "Young Intelli, young Mikazuchi, are you both alright?" She heard All Might question, though his voice did sound a little weird over the comms. "Must just be the ringing in my ears," Psycho reasoned before responding that she was fine. That's when she felt herself go stiff. "Well, that's a relief." All Might's voice rang out again, this time coming from the hole in the wall with a figure walking through it. This turned out to be Shinso, who had used his voice modifier to recreate All Might's voice. "Now we can end this, without any complications," the brainwasher commented as he strolled forward leisurely as said created ink beast just in case. "Not that they'll be needed," Psycho thought, frustrated as she couldn't move a muscle, and in the corner of her eyes she could see Kagura in the same predicament, and both can only watch as Shinso touched the bomb and claimed victory. Line break. "Now then, who can tell me the MVP of the match?" All Might asked as the class thought it over. Finally it was Setsuna who raised her hand. "It was Shimura, sir," she exclaimed, getting a nod from All Might, who motioned for her to explain. "Well, the villains are immediately out of the running, since they wasted their time squabbling and while having a tit measuring contest." She began, getting All Might to suddenly cough, as well as some of the more prudish classmates, while those like Izuku, Cherry, Edward, and Ryuko laughed as Setsuna continued. "Shinso seems like the obvious choice at first, but chances are that he would have had a harder time getting the drop on them if Sai didn't send them into a panic. Sai also proceeded to create some ink beast as a back plan, while Shino didn't even bother checking for any traps. True, they didn't have time to lay any, but that won't always be the case," the Dino-loving girl explained, with Sai smiling at the praise and Shinso grunting but nodding in acknowledgement at the criticism. All Might nodded. "Not exactly the way I would have put it, but overall correct. However, young Shimura, one thing to add. It's stated that your quirk can also be used to gather information. Remember that for the future. You may not have needed it here, but that skill will be invaluable in the future." The pro advised, with Sai nodding, having been told that before. Izuku meanwhile had approached Momo, who had been still since the trial ended. "Well, looks like that's 3-0 to me. That's game, set, and match," he teased, with Momo looking crestfallen at having been wrong so many times in a row. "What's going on? How could I have missed so many obvious signs?" she breathed herself. "You were trained in tactical thinking and strategizing from such a long age, and you made so many rookie mistakes," she screamed in her hand, wanting desperately for a chance to redeem herself. Luckily for her, she was about to get that chance. "Alright, the next teams will be," All Might said, his hands swirling around the 2 boxes. "Team B as the heroes and Team D as the villains," he announced as everyone looked at Izuku and Momo with some wondering if this was just luck or if All Might had actually found a way to rig it. Izuku, hearing it was his turn and who he was going up against, smiled eagerly in anticipation. "Well, my dear, looks like we're going to have a bonus round," he said, with the sounds of cheering echoing around him. Momo just stood there in a daze before quickly running out of the room, with Azuri hurrying after her partner, so they could strategize. "Well, she seems raring to go." Kendo chuckled nervously at the state the recommendation student was in before looking up at her partner. "So you got a plan, right? You didn't just spend all that time flirting and teasing Yayarosa, did you?" she asked, with Izuku smiling down at her. "Of course I did it, Suka. I've had it planned since it was announced we would be partners," he told her. "Oh, and exactly is my part in this?" she asked with a nervous smile as they walked towards the training field, while mentally questioning why he chose to use her given name so soon after meeting her. "Oh, that's simple, my dear," he told her in a drawl before his eyes lit up. You're the star. Line break. Tsuyu sighed deeply as she tried to get her partner's attention, something she had been trying to do for the last few minutes. The two were standing in front of the building where the trial was to take place, and had less than a minute to finish strategizing before the round began. Unfortunately, Momo seemed lost in her own head, muttering under her breath and seemed to be debating with herself every few seconds. The frog girl was about to try and get the taller girl's attention again when All Might's voice suddenly broke the silence. Alright, teams, your 5 minutes are up, so without any further delay, begin. BOM. Both Momo and Tsuyu's eyes widened in horror as the building in front of them was engulfed in flames. Meanwhile, in the control room, All Might was frantically going from screen to screen while trying to find his students, while the ones behind him panicked and was scrambling to see what was happening. The only ones not freaking out were Cherry, Hitoshi, and Inesa, who were watching the screens with various amounts of amusement. Finally, after several seconds, All Might let out a sigh of relief when he finally found them. Young Midoriya was standing there, smile still in place and without a care in the world, as he chatted with young Kendo, or at least he thought that other person was Kendo. They were wrapped in a white cloak and a gas mask and were standing there quite comfortably. Young Midoriya, young Kendo, what happened? Are you both okay? The teacher asked frantically, with Kendo being the one to answer him. We're fine, sir, and sorry about the scare. It's all part of the plan. She reveled, causing All Might's and most of the class's eyes to widen. Plan? You mean you're the cause of this fire? All Might demanded, with both nodding their heads yes. Indeed, and it's all thanks to this little wonder. Izuku answered this time, his radio voice coming through crystal clear as he held up a glowing, red sphere. With this little beauty I can control everything about the flames, from the range to the intensity, and even the heat. He explained, moving his finger around the orb as the fire grew weaker and stronger. Hearing the explanation, All Might calmed down considerably, though he still needed to know about young Kendo. And those objects that young Kendo is currently wearing, I take it they are to protect her from the flames? He asked, just to make sure. Yup, the cloak is what I like to call an ice cloak. Anyone wearing it can walk around conformably in an inferno without the slightest chance of being burned, while the mask I simply call air can store up to 6 hours of breathable oxygen, though I am currently on extending the time limit. Izuku admitted as the class and All Might just stood there stunned. Slowly and robotically the hero turned to those that knew him best. Young Bomb, did he really make all those things, and do they really do the things he claims? All Might questioned, with Cherry along with Shinso and Inesa. Sure did, he's got created thousands of little things like that. Tested them all himself, and yes, they work. Cherry confirmed, with All Might nodding before speaking into the microphone linked to everyone's headset. The battle trial will now continue. Line break. Tsuyu, hearing the announcement, breathed a sigh of relief. So it's just part of the villain's plan, what a relief. She thought before looking up. Still though, how are we going to get past that fire? She wondered as she watched Momo pace around furiously, muttering furiously as she tried to think of a way to get past the fire. Unfortunately, Momo was so caught up in her thinking that she didn't see multiple figures move to the window nor the arrows that flew towards her. Luckily Tsuyu did, and with quick flick of her tongue grabbed Momo and pulled her out of the way just before the arrows hit the ground. Snatching one up, she was quick to examine it. Blunted arrows. She thought with relief. It would have hurt like hell, but wouldn't have killed us. She thought before looking up to see the archers, only to see skeletons with glowing eyes reloading their bows and crossbows. Quickly the two girls ducked behind a building on the opposite side of the step to get out of the range of fire. Well, this is a real mess. Sue croaked, trying not seeing anyway, and with the fire spreading more and more to other builds with skeletons lining every window. Momo was looking around desperately, searching for a weak point that they could exploit. Should I create something that shields us from the fire, smoke, and arrows? No, I don't know what else they have waiting for us. Should I create a cannon and blow the front of the building down like Bomb and Nikos did? No, that would leave me without my Quirk and Sue having to face them alone, not to mention they probably have defenses against a plan like that. Come on, Momo, think, she thought frantically. However, all thoughts were cut off when the monstrous roar FO an engine with the ground below them starting to crack and shake violently. Until finally, with a giant KBOM, something shot out of the ground and landing right in front of the heroes and revealing it to be Kendo driving a behemoth of three-wheeled motorcycle. The bike was the size of each of the building with spikes covering much of the bike itself, including the wheels. A burning bull skull acting as its headlights with platforms in place of saddlebags. Kendo herself was seated on an elevated seat so she could see properly with her quirk big fist activated so she can use the handlebars with a helmet covering her head. Looking down, Kendo grinned at her opponents. "Sorry, little heroes," she said, getting into her role as a villain. "But we decided to change the rules a little bit. Now the hunters," she said, grinning down at them evilly as she revved the engine, "become the hunted," she finished as the bike launched forward and towards the pair. In the control room, most of the class was freaking out as the bike got closer and closer, and showed no signs of stopping, with Almight seconds away from stopping the match when the hero pair was suddenly launched back while a transparent red dome around the bike. "What the?" Almight questioned before a snort could be heard as the class turned to see Cherry snickering at their gobsmacked faces. "Come on, people, do you really think Beef Mittens would run over her classmates? Or that Izuku would make something that would allow her to actually do it?" she asked almost incuriously while the rest of the class looked sheepish. "Seriously, people, he's a showman, not a murderer," she huffed. "At least not yet," she added in her head, knowing that Izuku did plan to become an evil hero when he graduates. But her classmates didn't need to know that yet. For the next few minutes, the class watched as Kendo chased the hero team further and further away from the building and bomb, and even when the team tried to hide, Kendo was always on them within seconds as if she knew where they were. Still, All Might had to admit it was a genius strategy, though there was a small thing bugging him. "Young Bomb," he said, getting her attention. "You said young Midoriya created that bike, correct?" At her nod, he continued. "Tell me, is there any kind of limit or strain it puts on him?" he asked, Cherry thinking about it for a few seconds. "I don't think so. I mean, there might have been when he just got his quirk, but if he did, he either doesn't anymore or its upper limit isn't a problem anymore," she explained, causing the hero to nod as everyone turned their attention back to the match. Line break. Tsu and Momo were panting as they ducked into the nearest alleyway to hide. "How much time is left?" Tsu asked, hands on her knees as she looked at the recommendation student. "About couple of minutes at best," she answered, her huffing turning into a grimace as she looked around, not even sure where they were anymore. "Pretty far considering there's not any fire around here," she asked, seeing the buildings were untouched. "Well, guess we can forget about securing the bomb," Tsu said with a slight frown before looking up. "But we can at least take away complete victory from the villains by capturing Kendo," she said, with Momo looking at her with wide eyes. "And just how do you plan on doing that?" she demanded of the frog girl. "How are we going to stop that behemoth before she finds us?" she continued to question, knowing they had only seconds before the girl was on them again. "Well, we could." Suddenly Tsu stopped, her eyes widening as they saw something. "Momo." She spoke lowly, barely loud enough for Momo to hear. "Can you make me a loaded handgun? Doesn't have to use real bullets, with just has to shot and have something to shot," the frog girl requested, with Momo taken back for a second before creating and handing it to her. "Okay, so what are you going?" Bang. HHH. Thud. Momo's head snapped to the direction of the sound just in time to see what looked like a giant eyeball with wings disappear. "Well, looks like we know how they kept finding us," Tsu commented. Meanwhile, Izuku was now staring at the glowing red orb of his microphone with an intrigued smile as he scraped his chin. "Wonderfully done, Tsu," he thought before connecting Kendo. "Sorry to say, but our little eye in the sky has been grounded," he told the biker. "Not a problem, it saw enough for me to figure out where they were," Kendo said before tuning a corner and coming face to face with the hero team still in the alleyway. "Well, heroes, ready to end this little farce?" Kendo asked, revving the engine. Tsu turned to Momo to see if she had any ideas, only to see her muttering. "What do I do? What do I do? What do I do?" "Yayorose. Should we try to get to a rooftop or attack from above?" "Yayorose." Tsu called again, but it was no good. Momo was complete lost in her own head, causing Tsu to sigh. "Looks like it's up to me," she muttered before looking around and noticed how close the builds were to each other. Ribbit. She muttered before seeing Kendo about to charge again. It's worth a shot. It was then that Kendo shot forward that Tsu put her plan into action, quickly jumping from wall to get higher and higher until she was above Kendo's bike when she shot forward towards Kendo. If there's a barrier protecting Kendo, I'm screwed. The frog girl thought, shooting her tongue out. Luckily there was no barrier, and Tao's tongue wrapped around Kendo's wrist with the frog girl pulling with all her might, successfully pulling Kendo off her bike, causing her to tumble to the ground as the bike came to a stop inches away from a still paralyzed Momo. Not bad, Tsu, Kendo said, getting her feet. But what are you going to do now? She asked, acting her quirk as Tsu got into a fighting stance. Buzz. The time limit has ended, the villain team wins. Almight's voice rang out, causing Tsu and Kendo to drop their stances and Momo to snap out of her funk. Huh, what the? Momo asked, with Tsu just sighing as she pat the girl on her back. Come on, let's go. Line break. It was a multitude of cheers and shouts that the four retuned to from their fellow students, with All Might being most prominent. Well, that was certainly one of the strangest battle trials I've ever seen, he commented with a laugh, knowing that the principal who always watched the trials was probably laughing his fury ass off. Now then, before we go into the specifics of the match, who can tell me who the MVP is? He asked, with the class of tossing their hands, sure that it's either Itsuka or Izuku. What surprised All Might, however, was that Izuku was also raising his hand, a knowing smile on his face. Curious, All Might called on him. Yes, young Midoriya? With the boy grinning. Why isn't it obvious? The MVP is none other than our dear Tsu, he said, patting the girl's shoulder, getting stunned looks for the others, even more so when All Might nodding. Indeed, explain your reasoning, the teacher asked, with the boy humming. Well, it's obviously not me or Itsuka, for the simple reason we didn't take the trial seriously enough. If the main objective was just to keep the heroes busy until time ran out, then Itsuka would definitely be holding the title. But considering how there was also the option to capture the villains, and she decided to just chase them down, he explained, with Itsuka chuckling nervously, having got caught up in the fun. I am even worse, though. True, I was guarding the bomb, but with the powers and the distance the heroes ended up at, I could have easily left a few more summons and joined the fray to back my partner. Izuku finished his own criticism, with All Might nodding, happy to see the boy wasn't arrogant enough to not see his own faults. And young Yaira's? All Might asked, with Izuku chuckling. She simply got lost in her own head and was unable to react. Happens to the best of, really. Our gain from before probably didn't help matters, he admitted, with Momo looking down in shame, with All Might looking at his young student in concern. Looks like he'll have to talk to her later. Tsu, on the other hand, was able to keep her head through the whole simulation, as well as get Itsuka off the bike, and might have even put up a good fight had the time not ended when it did. Izuku finished, with All Might nodding. Exactly right on all accounts, he said before turning to the rest of his students. Remember this, young heroes, you must always stay focused on the task at hand, never make assumptions, never take it easy even when victory seems assured, and never lose yourselves to your fear. Young Kendo, Midoriya, and Yaoyorozu all fell victim to one of these, while Azuri didn't. Instead, she remained cool, calmed, and collected while focusing on the matter at hand. The pro hero explained, getting nods from the rest of the class, including to his relief Yaoyorozu, who seemed to start coming out of her funk. Now then, let's move on to the final test, with Team I as the heroes and Team J as the villains, All Might announced, and before Ryuko could say anything, she was grabbed by an overly excited Inasa, who threw her over his shoulder and ran down the hall while ignoring the girl's demand to let her down as she hit him repeatedly in the head, which the wind manipulator easily ignored. You ready to do this, Kiri? Mina shouted to her red-headed friend, who nodded equally as excited. Hell yeah, it's time to show these guys just how big of a man I really am, the hardening quirk user shouted as the two ran out of the room to plan how to defend their bomb. In their excitement, they never noticed Izuku watching them in amazement before shaking his head. Poor fools won't know what hit him. Line break. Alright, everything's ready, Kirishima shouted, with Mina nodding, having used her acid to melt several of the floors that lead to them, forcing them to take a specific route where they could better control the situation. Alright, the 5 minutes are up, the hero team may begin. All Might proclaimed with the villains confident they could win. That confidence shattered, however, when the ground started to shake violently, and when Mina ran to investigate, the only thing she could get out was, "Holy shit," as the building the two were in was being lifted by a giant tornado. The pair had no time to gap at the sight, however, as something instantly shot up from the street before crashing through the wall, sending dust flying everywhere. Through the dust, Mina could barely make out the large shape that crashed through the window, shot towards and grabbing her before continuing forwards, tackling Kirishima through the wall and sending through the melted floor and onto the floor below. "The bomb has been secured, the hero team wins." All Might's voice rang through their earpieces, causing both Kirishima and Mina to gasp as they shoot up, while the shape revealed to be Inasa cheered in triumph, which the two ignored and ran back up the stairs and towards the room where the bomb was, only to find Ryuko leaning against the bomb. Her eyes closed and a confident smirk her face as she opened one her eyes and gave lazy wave. "Hey!" Line break. Unsurprisingly, Inasa was named MVP for not only causing the distraction but also getting the villains out of the room so that his partner could get to the bomb. However, there also wasn't really anything that could be criticized. The villain's trap may have failed, but it was still clever, and Ryuko didn't try to pick a fight of her own and instead focused on getting to the bomb. "Excellent work, everyone!" All Might congratulated his class, his smile wider than normal as he just witnessed the A-class, the class that everyone would be looking towards to lead the next generations of heroes in Japan. "Remember this well, children, though you might have a ways to go before you can call yourselves heroes, you all have shown why you are here, and as well as showed that you all do deserve to be here, whether you have won or lost today." All Might exclaimed, and the class, no matter the results of today's lesson, felt their confidence rise thanks to the number one hero's word. "Now go get changed for your next class," All Might exclaimed and posed like he was about to run. "And always remember these words. Go beyond plus YOTRAA." All Might shouted as he shot off down the hall in a blur, leaving the class in awe at the display, with some not being able to keep themselves from applauding. "Now that's an exit." Setsuna grinned, feeling just as pumped as she before the class, with the rest of the class agreeing as they made their way to the locker room. "Hell yeah, an awesome way into an awesome class," Cherry said, her tone matching the mad grin on her face as the class entered their respective locker rooms. And as he watched his classmates talk and compare their matches while adding his own 2 cents every once in a while, Izuku's smile grew wider and wider as his eyes started to grow brighter. Knowing that if this was just their introduction to the hero course, then the rest of his time at UA was going to be nothing short of magnificent. The USJ. It was the day after the battle trials, and 1A was waiting for class to start. "So what do you think we'll be doing today?" Setsuna asked Mina, Mirajane, and Pira as they all huddled around the metal manipulator's desk. "I don't know, but it probably won't be anything as exciting as yesterday." Mira voiced her thoughts, hands to her chin as she tried to image what could be next. "I mean, yesterday was probably just to show what we should expect. All Might and the rest of the teachers will probably dial it back for a couple of days." The white-haired beauty guessed, with Mina and Setsuna slumping in their chairs with disappointment, while Pira nodded in agreement. "I have to agree, Class 1A is known for advanced and harsh training, but if they keep upping the ante every day, then it would run the risk of permanently crippling their students." The redhead explained, with Mina and Setsuna nodding in understanding and resignation that their class were going to become slower, as Pira looking up in thought. "Not to mention the school might actually go bankrupt with all the damage we did yesterday." This got some laughs from the other three, remembering how many times the building was destroyed yesterday, before moving on to other topics. While this was going on, Izuku, Cherry, Hitoshi, and Inasa were also talking, and they were joined by Fumikage, Tsuyu, Momo, and Saiko. "So all Class 1B did yesterday was quirk testing with All Might?" Saiko asked, with Izuku and Cherry nodded. "Yup, friend of ours is there, and he told us this morning on the way here." Cherry explained, with Izuku humming in agreement, though his mind was elsewhere. Katsuki had been acting quite strange for almost an entire year now, starting around the day he got attacked by the slime villain. Ever since that day, he had distracted, often leaving right after school and not showing up until the next day, all under the guise of secret training. Multiple times Izuku considered following him to see what he was up to, but always decided against it, figuring since the ashen-haired blonde never appeared with anything more than a few scrapes and bruises, then it should be fine. That all changed after school yesterday when Izuku and Cherry waited for him for half an hour before going to look for him. They eventually found him in the recovery girl's office resting after the youthful hero restored his broken arm. However, it was what she said next that shocked them. Figuring that since they, or at least Izuku, were quite close friends with the boy, she felt it fine to tell them it was misusing his quirk that led him to breaking his arm. Hearing that, Izuku's mind raced through questions. What was she talking about? Did Bakugo get his explosion quirk back? If he did, when? And why didn't he say anything? Was that what he was doing for the last few months of training? Or was it a completely different quirk? Izuku highly doubted it was a new quirk, but if it were, that opened an entirely new can of worms, such as someone actually getting a second quirk. No way would Bakugo keep that to himself, and even if he did, or more likely Natsuki forced him to, Yue would have to have known, and there's no way Yue could have kept it a secret for this long, Izuku had thought. But before he could ask any questions, Katsuki started to air, forcing the two students' and nurse's attention. The ashen blonde groaned as he started to come around, mumbling something about damn pink cheeks, before finally coming around fully. First he saw Recovery Girl, which caused him to physically roll his eyes, but once he saw Cherry and Izuku and the questioning looks the two no doubt had won his face, his eyes slowly widened into a panic before his eyes darted to the aged heroine as a look of terrified realization set in as his mind paced together what must have happened. No one said a word to each other as they walked home, not even when Cherry split off to head towards her home, leaving the boys alone. When they reached Katsuki's house, Izuku watched his oldest friend walk towards his front door before standing there. For a minute he stood there, his fist clenching and unclenching repeatedly, until with one final growl he threw open the door before slamming it shut, ignoring his mother yelling. Bakugo didn't meet Izuku at their usual meet-up point anywhere, but Izuku was sure he had made it to school. There's no point in dwelling on it, Izuku thought with a sigh. Knowing Katsuki, he'll tell me when's he ready, he continued before noticing Cherry trying to get his attention with the rest of his friends looking at him in concern. Smiling softly, Izuku was quick to reassure them. Not to worry, my friends. Just a little on my mind at the moment, he promised, and even though they traded unsure looks with each other, they didn't press the issue. Not that they could have, because the bell rang at that moment with Aizawa entered as everyone moved back to their seats. Morning, everyone, the teacher muttered as he looked over his class. I've reviewed the results of your battle trials yesterday, he told them as some tensed up. Not bad overall, he said, causing them to relax. However, and right back to tense. Some of you need to get it together if you want to stay in this class, he warned as his eyes went over his students, who either frowned but nodded, glared, or in one case smiled widely. Aizawa inwardly sighed at the last one. Damn problem child, he thought before moving on. Now then, what comes next could decide your future, Aizawa warned his class as he moved on to the next item of business. Come on, some of the class thought, exasperated and worried about what comes next. Though that would quickly change. You need to pick class representatives, Aizawa told his class, sounding completely uninterested as he brought out a box and slips of paper as the class erupted into noise and with multiple students volunteering to do it. Quiet, Aizawa ordered while activating his quirk, instantly getting his students to quiet down. Now then, you each cast a vote to determine who becomes the representatives, Aizawa explained, having long ago learned this was the easiest and most logical way to pick. Which is why he groaned inwardly as Pira raised her hand. Sir, is that really the best method to choosing? Having just met each other, we won't really know. She started to trail off as she noticed Aizawa direct his full glare at her. Just do it, he ordered, causing the redhead to squeak as the class each took a slip and wrote down who they voted for. Soon the votes were tallied and the results were in. Your class president is Izuku Midoriya and your vice president is Tsuyu Azuri, Aizawa announced as the two students stood in front of the class with Izuku giving a bow and Tsu waving. Turns out Izuku got 7 votes and Tsuyu got 5. Thank you, my new friends, will do my best to live up to your expectations, Izuku promised as the sounds of thunderous applause could be heard, with Tsu nodding in agreement. We won't let you down, she added. Classes went on as normal after that, and soon the Hero Course students found themselves at lunch with Tsuyu now joining Izuku and his group of friends. You know, it's funny, I never thought I'd be elected, I don't even know who voted for me. Suyu told her classmates, as the group of now 5 sat in the cafeteria and once again ignoring the glaring trio that was a part of Class B. Hearing this, Izuku let out a laugh. Well, I did for one, my dear froggy friend. Izuku told the green-haired girl, who's rapidly blinking, and stated, Ribbit, was the only indication of her surprise. Why so surprised? You performed masterfully during the trials yesterday. If anything, I should be the surprised that anyone would vote for me. Izuku told her with a laugh, missing the looks Fumikage, Cherry and Pira gave each other. In fact, I have something to give you as congratulations. Izuku told her with a red portal appeared over his outstretched hand as a something dropped into it a few seconds later. It didn't look all that special, just a regular sliver watch with what looks like a lily pad in the space where the face should be. As he moved his hand over to give the frog girl her gift, said girl tried to deny it. You don't have to do that, Izuku, really, she said, waving her hands slightly, but Izuku was having none of it. Oh, I know, but I want to. Besides, I was planning on giving this to you anyway. I originally made it when I was younger, when I was still having trouble creating shields. But after a few modifications, I think you'll be very satisfied with the results. Izuku predicated and was just about to explain what it did when the alarms started going off. Panic erupted instantly as all the students in the cafeteria insanity started to scramble to the exit, slamming into each other in an instant. Izuku was in the air in an instant carrying Cherry, while Fumikage had Dark Shadow use one hand to grab the ceiling to haul himself up while using the other to pick Pira up. This, however, left Sue on the ground, and right before she jumped to one of the walls, she heard Izuku call out to her. Sue, quickly jump into the air and yell out lily pad. Izuku ordered, quickly throwing her the watch, and not seeing a better option, she quickly put it on and jumped, and when she was about level with the others, cried out, lily pad. Instantly a large, dark green construct in the shape of a lily pad appeared under her feet. Eyes wide, Suyu and the other 4 stared at the sight, momentarily forgetting about the chaos below. Izuku meanwhile placed Cherry onto the pad, which was just big enough to carry the 2 of them, before heading towards the window. Now then, let's see if I can see anything, Izuku thought, but as he looked out the window, a rare annoyed frown came to his face. Really, all of this over the press of all things? He thought as saw the press had broken in, and no doubt caused the alarm. Well, that's the cause, but we still need to deal with this mess, Izuku thought as he stared at the still panicking students, and just as it looked at a full-scale riot was going to break out, Izuku snapped his fingers. In a second, the agonizing sound of nails scraping on a chalkboard was heard, causing everyone present to hunch over and hold their hands over their ears. Seeing that things were now under control, the noise died down. Well, now that that's out of the way, you'll be happy to know that the cause of this little panic was simply a few overeager newscasters, as you can see for yourselves, he invited as a red arrow appeared pointing to the window, accompanied by a ding-ding-ding noise. As students went to check on the claim, Izuku drifted back to the floor and was about to rejoin his lunch group when he felt a hand grab his shoulder roughly. This instantly caused Izuku to twitch, which only got worse when the radio voice boy recognized the voice belonging to Tenya Ida. You remorseless savage, I know you were black-hearted, but to do this to a fellow student is unforgivable. He yelled directly into Izuku's face, only further infuriating the teen before his attention was drawn into what, or rather who, was in the annoying teen's other hand. It was a girl around their age, shaking violently. She had black eyes and purple hair. However, the most eye-catching thing about her were her ears. There were jacks dangling down from the Lopez, and although she was clutching her ears, Izuku could see blood dripping down through her fingers. During this time, Ida was still ranting. How could you be so irresponsible that you didn't even consider all? Ida was cut off mid-rant when Izuku shoved him roughly, forcing him to let go of him and the girl as he was sent flying into the wall, where a couple of his classmates ran to check on him. Ignoring this, the red-eyed teen calmly knelt down as his hands started glowing green as he gently cupped her hands with his own as the glow extended to the girl's hands and ears. After a couple of seconds, the girl stopped shaking and slowly took her hands off her ears, which had stopped bleeding. Are you alright? Izuku asked, his voice coming out in a rare normal tone, with the girl slowly nodding. Why, yeah, she answered slowly as she inspected her ears. Thanks, she told the undead teen, who shook his head. Don't thank me, I'm the one who caused your distress, miss, Izuku reminded her, but trailed off, realizing he didn't get her name. Something the girl also seemed to realize. Kyokajiru. She introduced herself, causing Izuku to smile and give her a short bow. Izuku Midoriya, he introduced himself, his voice back to that of a radio. It's a pleasure to meet you, though I wish it were under better circumstances, he told her before a small frown came to his face. Apologies for that, by the way. Had I known there was someone with sensitive ears like yours, I would have chosen a different method. He apologized, with the girl waving it off. It's cool, chances are things would have gone much worse if that panic would have continued. Jiraiya waved his apology off. Even then, I should escort you to Recovery Girl's office to get you checked out, he insisted as he helped her up before turning to his classmates. Please inform Mr. Aizawa where I am, he asked, getting nods in return, and was about to leave when he snapped his fingers. I nearly forgot, he muttered before materializing a small booklet and floating it over to Tsuyu. That will tell you the ins and outs of the lily pad, study hard, he called out, already exiting with Jiraiya. Meanwhile, outside, the teachers were busy examining the destroyed barrier. So what do you think? The R-rated hero Midnight asked, hands on her hips as she looked over the door. I don't think the reporters were responsible for this, she told the other three present, Erasered, Present Mike and Principal Niza. Definitely not, the mystery animal agreed. It's clear whoever did this knew what would most likely happen and was wanting to use it as a distraction, he continued. Still, whoever did this was quick. They were able to melt the barrier without anyone noticing, Present Mike added on, taking off his glasses to examine the damage more closely. No, not melted, Aizawa corrected, coming into the conversation as he used a pair of pilers to pick a piece of the destroyed gate to examine more thoroughly, and indeed the fragments did show signs of decay rather than signs of being melted. So we've got a villain who most likely has a decaying quirk, and they caused a panic in the middle of the day, no doubt as a distraction. Niza went over all the facts they had gathered. The only question is, he continued to walk until he was facing his staff. Who is responsible for this? Line break. Hours later, and in a bar, two figures sat. The first is a slim man with pale skin, tinged yellow teeth, and wrinkled a great deal around his eyes. His lips are chapped and uneven, a small mole on the right underneath, with visible scars on his right eye and under his lip. He has messy grayish-blue hair of varying lengths, the longest clumps reaching to about his shoulders, left hanging over his face in uneven waves with two beady, red eyes. He wore a black shirt and pants with red shoes and had 14 hands embedded over his body. The second's entire body is made out of a dark purple mist, save for his eyes, which are glowing yellow. He wears a very elegant suit with a tie and has a metal brace that goes from around his collarbone to just below his eyes. This was Tamura Shigaraki and Kurojiri, and currently the two were facing a TV that had audio only on the screen. You did well getting these, Tamura Shigaraki, as well as you, Kurojiri. A low but smooth voice praised the now named Kurojiri, simply bowed in gratitude while Tamura grinned childishly. Thank you, master. So how does it look? Will the future of Japan's heroes be a problem tomorrow? He asked mockingly as he finished his question and wanting to know his sensei's thoughts. The answer was a surprise, however. Of course they will, Tamura Shigaraki. The answer came swift and absolute, which shocked the aspiring villain. These are the students that have been judged to be the absolute best in the country. To dismiss them as a non-threat is nothing short of foolish. Sensei's voice came out clear and loud, knowing it was the only way to get it through his student's head. Tamura growled, hating that his master thought he could have trouble with a bunch of brats, but knew better than to argue, so he muttered a small, "Yes, sensei," to show he understood. Now there is one last thing I have acquired that I think can increase your odds at succeeding, Sensei said, and immediately the blue-haired man's eyes filled with greed. But first there is a matter I have to discuss with you, Sensei continued, sounding more serious than the two have ever heard him. It got even more confusing when a picture of a teen with gray skin, razor-sharp, yellow teeth and red eyes and hair appeared on the screen. This is Izuku Midoriya, and under no circumstances is he to be killed. He gave the order, shocking the pair. Master, may we know why? Kurojiri asked. Are you hoping to recruit the young man or maybe take his quirk? The warp gate user asked, with the voice on the TV letting out a laugh. One or the other, he admitted. But unfortunately we don't have the forces to bring him here right now, so for now try and gauge his level of strength. The master ordered with Kurogyri nodding and understanding before noticing something that caused his hidden yellow eyes to widen. Tamura was shaking in silent, jealous rage. No doubt furious someone other than himself had caught the master's attention. However, before he could fly into a rant, the master's voice came out over the TV, this time cold and commanding. And do you understand, Tamura Shigaraki? The coldness of his master's voice and the tone it was asked instantly wiped any rage that was within the aspiring villain, leaving him to only nod submissively with a small, "Yes, master." Good. And like that, the master's tone was back to how it was before. Now I have one last request regarding Izuku Midoriya. Tamura, if you get the chance, there is a certain question I want you to ask this young man if you have a chance tomorrow. Sensei asked, with Tamura raising an eyebrow at what his master would want to know. And that didn't get any better when he heard the question, though judging by Kurogyri's widening eyes and tensing of the shoulders, he knew it had to be something big. Master, are you saying? Kurogyri asked, his voice stuttering, with his master letting out a tired sigh. It's only a suspicion for now, Kurogyri, but I must know for certain. The master told the two, sounding more solemn than they ever heard him. Tamura at this point had had enough about talking about some high school brat, and wanted to get back to something more important, namely his present from his master. Master, you mentioned something that would help with tomorrow. What is it? He asked, causing the mazer to chuckle. Yes, I merely forgot. Kurogyri, bring it in. The voice ordered, and with a quick motion a portal opened and a large wooden box that Tamura approached and poked with a finger, only to jerk back when it shook violently with a loud, maniacal and robotic laugh sounded from it. A little hard to control, I've been told, the voice admitted as the two in the bar looked over the box. Though considering who's created it. He trailed off as Shigaraki and Kurogyri found it, a symbol on the side, and their eyes went wide seeing it. It was well worth the cost. Line break. It was time for Class A's next hero lesson, and they were in for a treat. Rescue training, this is gonna be awesome, Kirishima exclaimed, brimming with excitement, a sentiment shared by most if not all the class as they rode the bus to where their training would take place. Indeed, this will be an excellent test for my mental abilities, Psycho proclaimed while tapping the multiple glass vials secured in her costume's pocket, each filled with a different kind of tea. Indeed, with the different situations that we'll face as heroes, it's important we get all the experience we can get. Momo beamed at her classmates. I hope there's water rescue training. Tsu added her piece to the conversation, the lily pad watch secure on her wrist, having studied the manual Izuku gave her and practiced in her backyard the previous night. What about you two? The vice president asked, turning to Izuku and Cherry. You excited for rescue training? The response she got was a shrug from Cherry. I guess, but I'm planning on being a combat specialist. She informed, not going into that like Izuku. She planned to become an evil hero before gesturing to said red-eyed boy. As for this guy, I'm pretty sure he'd be excited for anything he found remotely entertaining, she said, getting laughs from several of the class, even Izuku himself, who wasn't even trying to deny it. Alright, everyone hush up. We're here, Aizawa ordered, getting up and leading the class off the bus and to large domed building with the Space Hero 13 waiting for them. Welcome to the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, or USJ for short. The hero spoke, doing a small bow as she did, getting an applause from the class. Aizawa, however, noticed something, or rather someone was missing. Where's Almight? He was supposed to be here, the underground hero asked, with the Space Hero holding up 3 fingers. He was called in by Principal Niza for a meeting, and for us to continue on without him, the black hole user explained, with Aizawa groaning in annoyance. With that settled, 13 turned back to the eager students. Now there are a couple of things I want to go over with you all first. No, wait, 3, number 4, maybe 5-inch. She continued to mutter as she trailed off, causing the class to sweat drop. As the hero rambled on, Cherry noticed Izuku start to twitch slightly. What's up? You sense anything? She asked quietly, knowing that her taller friend only got like this when something big was gonna happen. No, just got a feeling is all, he whispered back as the Cyclops blew some of her hair out of her face in annoyance. And that's all I have to say. Please take it to heart as you continue your training. 13 finished her speech before heading towards the doors. And with that, I welcome you all to the USJ. She welcomed, and the doors opened with the class gasping at the sight before them. Now then, I think we should start with. Aizawa tried to start only to immediately be pushed aside by Izuku, who stormed his way to the front, his hand glowing a crimson red as a barrier appeared in front of the class. Before he could even open his mouth to demand any explanation, the sound of gunfire filled the air, and seconds later hundreds of bullets slammed into the barrier before falling to the ground. Aizawa was stunned for only a single second before glaring down at the plaza, where a large mist had appeared with dozens of villains stepping out of it. And I didn't even notice that, Aizawa berated himself. But he did. The pro thought as he glanced towards his undead student, who was looking down at the growing number of villains with an amused, almost borderline bloodthirsty grin. Others looked less happy. Hey now, Kirishima said, a nervous smile on his face. This is part of the training, right? Deal with villains while trying to save people, right? He asked, only to be deterred when 13 shook her head. No, those are real villains, I'm afraid, she said, and after a moment she cursed. And they've also cut off our communications. She continued, having tried to contact the rest of the school. Meanwhile, down in the plaza, Tamura Shigaraki stepped out of the gate along with a large muscular monster with its brain exposed and a monstrous bird-like beak. So it seems like our first attack failed. The red-eyed man glared up at the brat, who stopped his minions from getting in perfect win, and it only got worse as he recognized it was the same kid his sensei said not to kill. Izuku bucking Midoriya. Indeed, it would seem the master was right to be weary of him. Kurojiri added, returning to his semi-normal form, getting a growl from Tamura, which only got worse when he noticed Almight, the main boss and reason why they came to clear this level, wasn't here. Something the mist villain also noticed. Perhaps something came up that made All Might coming here impossible, the teleporter theorized. Back to the class, Mizo had just relayed what was being said to his teacher, having been able to hear the conversation thanks to his quirk. Midoriya, opened up a portal immediately, the underground hero ordered. Normally he would have jumped into the fray to give his students a chance to escape, but given Midoriya's barrier, he felt it was unneeded. However, Izuku couldn't even snap his fingers before Kurojiri appeared before them. Oh, I wouldn't recommend that, the villain taunted with a chuckle. Not unless you want your precious school to go up in flames, he challenged with the student's eyes widening in alarm. And just what the hell does that mean? Aizawa growled, with the mist continuing to laugh. Just as I implied. As I'm sure you recall, there was a little incident yesterday involving an intrusion of reporters. Well, we, the League of Villains, had a hand in that, Kurogirly admitted, and grew even more amused when he saw several of the students either activate their quirk or inch towards their weapons. There was certain information we needed, you see, and thankfully we were able to retrieve it. Here Aizawa started gritting his teeth, understating now why villain would try and attack the school. Though we didn't want to leave without giving something in return, so we left a few packages here and there that are set to go off should anyone leave this building, Kurojiri continued to brag. Oh, is that so? Yes, it is, and... Here Kurojiri froze and seemed to fall into a trance, with Aizawa looking over towards Shinso. Good work, he praised, with both Inzasa and Ijiro slapping him on the back. Meanwhile, Ed created a dome around Kurojiri to not only stop the villains from grabbing him, but also so nothing will accidentally hit the warp villain, knocking him back to his senses. Well, that takes care of their getaway plan, but what are we going to do about the fact that we're all being held hostage? Ryuko asked, looking at the barrier where now multiple villains were trying to break it down. Well, first we need to get word out about the bombs, Sam muttered, kneeling down on the ground. Luckily, I have an idea, he told his classmates, as he wrote down all the information they had before creating an ink bird. We can get the information we have to the teachers with him. He explained his plan as he handed the information to the drawing. Okay, but how do we get it to the teachers? Su asked, with Izuku stepping forward. Leave that to me, he said, and with a snap of his fingers a portal just big enough for the bird to fly through, which it did instantly before it closed. Now then, I believe we should hand the planning over to Psycho here, Izuku advised, causing the students' eyes to widen. Midoriya, what are you saying? We have two pros here, why should I? The pale blue-haired girl tried to reason but stopped when Izuku calmly put a hand on her shoulder. First, neither teacher is exactly familiar with leading direct combat units, with Eraserhead working as an underground hero and 13 being a rescue-based hero. Izuku explained before turning with the rest of the class to see if said pro heroes had any objections to what the student had just said. Much to their surprise, neither pro even blinked at the claim, though it was hard to tell with 13, and the silence was enough to tell the class the two agreed with assessment. Second, because of your nature and how your quirk works, you've probably studied countless battle strategies growing up, which, with added with your quirk, will no doubt help come up with a strategy that will help lead us to victory. Izuku finished with a war bugle being heard in the background. Saiko took in everything he had to say before looking around to see if anyone objected. No one did. Silently and one by one each showed their support, and Kagura acknowledged that right now the one coming up with the plan should be Saiko. Touched and a fire being lit in her soul, she took a vial of black tea and downed it instantly as a sphere of math formulas surrounded her, as she closed her eyes. She remained like this for 10 seconds, where some of the class watched the barrier just to make sure the villains who were growing in number weren't able to breach it. Finally the formulas disappeared and she opened her eyes, a confident smile on her face. "Well?" Izuku asked, a knowing smirk on his face which grew as the girl's smile grew. "It's not the best, but it should work. Think I can get a map of the USJ?" she asked, and with a snap of his fingers a 3D map of the USJ appeared before them. "Alright, the best I could come up with is an age-old classic, divide and conquer," she revealed, getting some uncertain looks. "Look, I know it's not ideal, but if we do it right we should pull it off. Now the best I can figure is that villains are waiting in each of these disaster zones, and the Mist villain was probably meant to separate and divide us. And considering how they admitted to stealing information, it stands to figure they'd seen us to where we're at our worst. So I say let's use that to our advantage. We'll divide into 8 teams, 4 teams of 3 and 4 teams of 2. Saiko went on to explain. The teams 3 are Shoji, Sai and Shinso. You 3 need to stay here and guard the villain with Aizawa-sensei and 13-sensei. The 3 named students nodded, along with the 2 teachers, knowing the villains needed to be guarded, or at least have Shinso around to put him back under control. Next comes Inasa, Tsuyu and Mir Jane in the flooded zone. With your abilities and agility you should be able to deal with them easily. Here Tsu and Mir Jane both gave nods as Inasa pumped his fists. Let's do it. The wind manipulator roared, ready to fight. Next comes Momo, Setsuna and Itsuki in the mountain zone. Momo can handle long range, Itsuki the short range, with Setsuna assisting both of them. Saiko reveled with the 3 giving each other high fives, confident they could win. Finally we have Kirishima, Ashido and myself in the ruin zone. With my heightened intelligence along with their teamwork we should make quick work of the enemy, Saiko said, revealing the last of the 3-man teams. Oh yeah, just say the word and I'll show those villains how real men act, Kirishima yelled. Yeah, just tell us what to do, Seiki, and we'll do it. Mina cheered, getting a smile and nod from the girl before moving on to the 2-man teams. Now for the first 2-man team, it'll be Midoriya and Bomb. The 2 of you together should be able to take those down in the plaza, even the villain with the hands and the bird creature. Saiko started off with the most obvious choice. Naturally, was all the undead boy said with Cherry's smile, that of absolute bloodlust. Next comes Nikos and Mikazuchi in the downpour zone. You both excel at long and short range, and there should be plenty of material there for the 2 of you to fight with. She went on with both girls stood by each other and banged their weapons together. Next Tokoemi and Matoi in the landslide zone, with Matoi smirking and Tokoemi giving off a nod with Dark Shadow letting out a laugh. And finally Alaric and Todoroki in the conflagration zone. She brought out of the last of the matches but sounded a lot less sure about this one, and it wasn't hard to see why. At first glance it seemed like a no-brainer. Send the son of the greatest fire quirk hero who work lets him use fire as well into a fire-based zone would be obvious. The problem is that up until this point the boy hadn't even attempted to use his fire, almost like he's refusing to use it. Shoto meanwhile scowled even more than usual. Of course he wasn't going to use his bastard father's fire, and naturally he could handle a fire zone with his mother's gift, so why were his classmates acting like he couldn't? He was about to tell them that he could handle himself when he felt a hand gripping his shoulder, and when he looked he saw Ed grinning at him. "Don't you worry guys, we got this, right?" he asked his partner, who after a moment gave a slow nod of agreement. With that, the teams and locations were picked, so Aizawa stepped forward. First of good work, he told Psycho. The teams and locations were logical, even if I do have doubts about some of them. Here he took a quick glance at Todoroki, who bristled but held his tongue. Still, I wish you didn't have to go through this, so soon into high school career. I know I keep reminding you of how you have to keep up, but this is the real thing, so I can't stress enough how important what I'm about to say next is. Aizawa said, and everyone had there was absolute focus on their teacher. None of you are allowed to die, Aizawa ordered, with each student blinking in surprise and confusion. Even those like Izuku and Mirajane, who could usually read people, were at a lose of what their teacher was trying to say. Something he rectified. What I mean is, do whatever it takes to stay alive. Doesn't matter what it is. Crippling the enemy, mass property damage, I will take full responsibility, so do what you must, even. Here he closed his eyes and took a deep breath, as if mentally preparing himself for what he said next before gathering his nerve and finishing his thought. Even if it means putting the enemy down. Permanently. He stated, and looked around and took in the faces of his students. Like he suspected, looks of shock and horror covered the faces of most of his class. Even the stoic Kagura and Shoji looked taken back. The only two who didn't look put out were Midoriya and Bomb, and given what he assumes what kind of heroes they're aspiring to be, it made sense. Raising his hand, he stopped any objection before they could start. Look, I am not saying you should go out killing right out the gate. Many of you have, I'm sure, have sworn to never take a life as a hero, and that is very admirable. Here many of the class heaved a great sigh of relief. However, if you want, kill, even if it means your death. But consider the fact that it won't always be just your life on the line. Teammates, other heroes, and especially civilians, the time may come where you have to do what you deem monstrous to save lives. The speech may have resonated with some, or at least got them thinking, but others still looking deeply troubled, causing him to sigh. Remember, you may be aiming for the title of heroes, but at the end of the day we're still only agents of the government, and that you may be ordered to do such acts. Just something to keep in mind, he said before turning to Izuku. Open the portals, he ordered, with Izuku nodding. In a snap of his fingers, 8 portals opened, each leading to a different disaster zone, along with 8 flying creatures from the battle trails. Figured I could keep an eye on things once Cherry and I finish up down there, was the answer to the unasked question. With nothing else holding them up, the class divided into their groups and stood in front of the correct portals, sharing one last look around, exchanging looks and nods. Best of luck, Aizawa wished for them before stepping through the portals, each closing a second later. Not even 5 seconds later, the sounds of screaming and battle filled the building. With that done, Izuku turned to Cherry, a matching pair of grins on their faces. Well, shall we go? He asked, snapping his fingers. The barrier started to glow brightly, and before the villains near it could act, it detonated, blasting them back and down to the others, battered and unconscious. With that out of the way, Izuku and Cherry were about to head into the fray when their teacher stopped. Midoriya, Cherry, he called out, and when they turned they saw he was glaring at them, his quirk active. I know what I said, killing, but that's only if there are no other options, he reminded them, his glare narrowing. If you actually take a life, and I suspect for even a second it was because of anything other than necessary, I will make sure you're taken in with the rest of these villains. He swore, his eyes now glowing bright red. Are we clear? The 2 childhood friends simply shared an amused look before looking back at their teacher and speaking as one. Crystal. And then Izuku and Cherry joined the battle. Taking a running front, the pair jumped into the air, with Izuku summoning his mic along with 7 large fire balls, launching them at great speeds. They detonated on impact with the ground, causing the villains to scream and scramble as 7 large fires and smoke surrounded the area, but it wasn't the end of it. With a closing of his hands, each of the fire spread and formed in cages, the villains capturing dozens of villains in each of the fire prisons. Cherry wasn't about to be undone. Laughing madly while spinning in the air, she created countless cherry bombs hurtling towards the remaining villains, who in the panic of the fireballs and the smoke didn't see them until they started detonated, causing their already rapidly decreasing numbers to plummet even faster. With one final swipe of his mic, Izuku cleared the smoke in the area, along with slowing their descent until the 2 were on the ground back to back with what used to be over 100, little less 20. The villains were frozen in absolute terror at the 2 monsters in front of them. Tamura was no exception, though he also felt rage and jealousy as well, having never been able to cause so much fear like this so quickly. No wonder Sensei is interested in this brat. He's a secret boss, the older man thought while scratching his neck frantically as he glanced at his newest toy. Even Nomu is scared to move. He thought, his temper rising. Nomu were supposed to be unfeeling and unthinking, made to only follow orders and nothing else. For the Nomu to act like this proved it. Still, though, Tamura thought, a sister grin on his face. Sensei said I can't kill him, but if a limb or two were to be torn off, well, recovery girl could portably save him. He thought before he remembered the promise he made to his sensei the night before, causing him to groan. Izuku and Cherry meanwhile were eyeing the terrified villains like predators would prey with matching slasher smiles, but before they could start the slaughter, the herd hand man speak up. Are you secret boss, the one next to the Cyclops? The leader spoke up, getting Izuku to raise an intrigued eyebrow while Cherry was figuring out how to shove one of her bombs up his ass for the Cyclops' comment. Tell me something, Mr. Secret Boss. Tamura spat out, wanting the fighting to begin as soon as he got his answer. How goes training with One for All? Tamura knew he must have said something right, because after hearing this the brat's eyes widened in shock. One for All? He gasped, sounding shocked, and for a brief second the villain smiled widely at seeing the almost scared look on the face of the brat who dared take his sensei's interest away from himself. Though it was gone immediately in the next second, however, as Izuku's face instantly fell flat. Never heard of it, he answered before instantly aiming his mic at the Nomu and then unleashing a fireball at the Nomu, causing Tamura to jump away just before the fire consumed it. This seemed to be the signal to start for the lesser villains, but also Cherry, who immediately jumped into the air again, creating 4 bombs before letting them fly, each fitting a villain, as Cherry landed on a villain's head before kicking off and knocking him out before doing another 4 times. On the last jump she conquered bombs on the knuckles of her 4 fingers before slamming it into the chin of a Minotaur Quirk user. Cuckold Cherry, she thought, the explosion instantly sending the man to the ground. WW, what the hell are we doing here? One of the remaining 7 villains thought, watching more than half of the surviving taken down in the matter of seconds. I don't know, man, but I'm getting the hell out of here. Another villain, his hand that of a wolf head, declared before making a run for it with the other 5 joining him. BMMM. Only for the 6th to instantly slam head first into the ground as 6 Izuku suddenly appeared next to them and hit them straight in the head, knocking them out. This left the one who spoke first near the edge, tears in his eyes, not knowing how to get out without getting himself killed. Poke. 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 Slowly and with tears now flowing freely, he turned around to find a 7th Izuku standing behind him, a pleasant smile on his face. Hello? Was all he said, or needed to say, as the crook finally was able to enter the pleasant world of unconsciousness. Gotta say that was less entertaining than I first thought it would be, Izuku told Cherry, who nodded in agreement before smirking and pointed over at Shigaraki. Well, we still have hand job over there, she reminded him as they turned to see the man scratching his face rapidly as he took a deep breath. NOMU. In an instant the experiment jumped from the fire covered in burns, which to both the heroes in training surprise were healed in the few seconds it took it to go from the fire into the air and then down to the ground, and although they only showed their surprise by a blinking rapidly, Shigaraki saw it and started to gloat. Nomu's got multiple quirks, including hyper-regeneration. Good luck getting through it when it was designed to stand up to All Might's attacks, he taunted as he started to laugh, feeling better as he revealed their secret weapon. Is that so? And there went his good mood as the new thorn in his side asked in that annoying voice of his as he stood there, one hand on his mic, the other raised in the air, glowing a neon green with a single finger raised, a hexahedron rotating on his finger. Well then, let's how it deals with this. With a flick of his finger the hexahedron hurtled towards the genetic weapon as everyone watched it peacefully enter the bioweapon's chest. For 5 seconds nothing happened and Shigaraki was about to mock the hero in training again when a bright light soon started to emit from the Nomu, growing brighter and brighter, forcing everyone to cover their eyes. When they could see again, both Cherry and Shigaraki were surprised to see the Nomu had somehow been split into 6 different pieces, with its 4 limbs along with its neck and head having been separated from its torso, and each encased by a large hexagon made of green energy. Oh please! Shigaraki scoffed at seeing this. I just finished telling you, idiot, that Nomu has hyper-regeneration. It'll be back to normal in seconds. He promised as he looked at his toy, waiting for it to do just that. Only for nothing to happen. As the seconds ticked by, Shigaraki was becoming more and more agitated as the itch became harder and harder to ignore. Nomu wasn't moving at all. Aside for an occasional blink, the beast remained still. You know. Izuku spoke up, relishing the way he saw the villain tense. It might not be reacting due to the fact that the beast's body doesn't sense anything wrong. That's the thing with my prison. It does nothing but detach the limbs and neck from the torso while doing nothing to harm whoever it hits. Not to mention the second one of the segments is gone, the part it was holding will instantly reattach itself to the torso. Izuku explained, with Shigaraki cackled as he rushed toward the nearest limb. Thanks for the info, idiot. I just gotta decay those stupid hexagons and I'll get Noma back. He shouted, not noticing the amused look on Izuku's face turn sinister as he reached the hexagon imprisoning and touched with all 5 of his fingers. Or at least tired to, as his hand went straight through it. Surprised but unwilling to give up on his gift, he tired repeatedly to slam both hands down onto the prison, growing more and more frustrated with each failed attempt. Not helping was the laugh tack that was coming from seemingly nowhere that grew louder and louder after each failed attempt. Oh, my fellow red-eyed fellow, you can't touch energy, everyone knows that. He heard the radio bastard laugh along with the Cyclops. That was what broke the camel's back for Shigaraki, who turned around to lunge at them. Sensei's orders by damned, when he suddenly found one of Cherry's bomb inches from his face glowing. Acting on instinct, Tamura instantly raised his hands to guard his face. BOM. The sound of the explosion was quickly drowned out by the villain's scream as he, like the Nomu, was completely engulfed in fire. However, unlike the Nomu, he had no resistance or regeneration to fight against it, forcing him to take on the full effect of the attack. Izuku was about to swing his mic so he could put the fire out as well as knock Shigaraki out when he started spewing black sludge from his eyes, nose and mouth, extinguishing the fire before covering the villain and causing him to vanish. Seeing this, Izuku let out a sigh. Well, looks like this show's over. He muttered, a little disappointed, as moved all the remaining uncurious villains into the fire cages along with the Nomu Jigsaw. The villains already trapped inside, too terrified to even blink, let out alone try to escape. Yeah, still it wasn't a bad first time, Cherry told him, scratching her arms over her head. Come on, let's head back up, she said, pointing to where their classmates were, with Izuku nodding in agreement. When they made it to the top of the stairs, Aizawa was there waiting for them. Well, teach, anything to say? Cherry asked with a challenging grin, with the underground hero simply giving a lazy blink. Honestly, I expected worse, the teacher admitted, ignoring the slightly insulted looks on his students' faces. He walked back to where the others were, along with 5 centaurs created by Sai, who walked up with a smile. Izuku, Cherry, it's good to see you both unharmed. He greeted them with Mizo nodding and giving them a thumbs up. Thanks, guys, Cherry told them before turning to Shinso with a grin. What, nothing from you? She asked, with the brainwasher snorting. Like there was any doubt you two would have any problems with low levels like that. He responded, with Cherry giving off an arrogant smile and nod. Still, maybe we should send these 2 to help the other students, 13 suggested, with Aizawa shaking his head no. It's best if keep them here. We don't know what else these villains could have planned, and sending them out unless we know they're not needed is illogical and wasteful, Aizawa countered, before looking around, watching and listening to the sounds of battle going on. Besides, we'll be able to take a look at what's going on in real time. Izuku revealed, his mic growing red before a red beam was blasted into the air and screens appeared showing their fellow classmates fighting against the villains. However, there was a problem, as instead of 6 screens there was only 5. Where is Alaric and Todoroki? Aizawa asked, turning to his student, a hint of worry in his tone. It only grew worse as he felt anger when his undead student didn't look the least bit worried like the rest of his classmates, yes, even Bomb, and looked like he was intrigued and worried. Honestly, it was probably just destroyed. Both our fellow classmates are capable of widespread and long-range attacks. Add in the fire and other villain attacks, it was probably just destroyed in the battle. The explanation seemed to calm the underground hero down and dismiss his anger at his student's logical explanation. Relenting, he addressed his student with a sigh. Fine, but in the future work on adding on a feature that alerts you when one of them are destroyed or something like that. You need to know when something like this happens, the teacher instructed. Will do. Izuku saluted before turning to the screens with a small smirk. Now then, let's see what kind of show our classmates can put on. Line break. When the villains first heard of the job, they were highly doubtful, more so when they heard not only would they be faced with the best students in the country, but also Almight himself. But when they knew who was hiring and what they had planned, those worries were put to bed as they were confident they could beat the best UA had to offer. Run, get away from her. She's a monster, a monster. I want to go home. Help me, mommy. Those fears, however, had returned 100-fold now, as the villains of the shipwrecked zone were now doing their best to get away from the monster. What's wrong? I thought you were here to kill and have your way with us, right? A demonic voice barked, causing them to flinch in fear before looking at who had spoken. This was Mirajane's Satan soul, the most basic form of her take over Quirk. The villains also flinched because that is indeed what they had promptly laughed about when Shitsuyu and Inasa had stepped through the portal and onto the boat. The villains went on laughing about how once they killed the boy they would have fun with the girls before killing them too. Those laughs soon turned to screams as Inasa shot into the air, enraged by the threats against his new friends, and created 3 twisters in the middle of the zone, pulling in all the villains that got too close to them. Tsu also took to the air using her jumping power, tongue and the lily pad, to not only avoid the villains' attacks but also grab them and slam them into the 8 pads with her tongue before finishing them off with kicks from her power legs, leading to the villains growing more frustrated and make more mistakes. However, it was Mirajane that was the real horror, transforming into her current state. From there she went on a rampage, diving into the water, beating everyone she came across, leaving them uncurious and floating on top of the water like a school of dead fish. Alright, enough of this, the lead villain of the group snarled, having enough of these brats treating them like nothing. I'll show you just what happens when you buck with adults. He snarled as a giant hand made of water rose before launching itself at the white-haired girl. Mirajane quickly flew out of the way before flying back and trying to ram into the villain, only for another hand made of water to appear, swatting her out of the way. Ha, take that, you hitch! He taunted as Mira quickly corrected herself. Alright then, she muttered as she flew up high until she was directly above the villain, and just out of reach before placing one hand over the other. Let's see how you deal with this evil explosion. At the declaration, a dark sphere appeared in her hands before in a burst blasted down onto the villain before an explosion erupted, covering the villain from view. When he was seen again, he was facing face down in the water, a few air bubbles around him, the only indication he's alive. At the sight of their leader and strongest fighter beaten, the other villains began to shake violently. It only grew worse when she turned to them and spoke words that chilled them to the bone. Well, who's next? Line break. Damn, Cherry whispered, having seen Mira kick all kinds of ass. Didn't think Little Miss Sunshine was capable of something like that, she said before turning and looking at her dead friend. Wonder what would happen if she and you went head to head? She asked, and although he didn't answer, a bloodthirsty smirk did appear on his face. From behind him the teachers heard them talk, and while 13 chuckled nervously at the thought of the two fighting, Aizawa groaned and made a mental reminder to do whatever he had to make sure they didn't go against each other. Until the sports festival, damn it. He groaned again in his head. Can't the universe just give him a break? Line break. In the downpour zone, the villains were currently hiding under the buildings with sweat dripping down their faces as some of them peeked nervously around the corners of the buildings to try and find their targets. Bang. 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 Only to instantly hit the ground as they were hit in the head. Luckily they were just knocked unconscious, but they joined the already 20 that were knocked out by the unseen sniper. Damn it, what the hell are we supposed to do? One of them demanded as he looked at his fellow villains. How the hell should we know? It's either get shot unconscious or end up like them, he shouted, pointing to a few separate groups of villains forced to head first into the ground, with the rain seeming falling much heavier than in the rest of the area. Look, another snapped, gaining the rest of the villains' attention. We just gotta separate, and catching them off guard. Once we knock out whoever's manipulating the gravity, we can get our guys back and then take out the bastard sniper. He planned, getting roars of agreement from the others. A sound plan. A woman spoke, her tone cold and strong as the villains felt the gravity grow heavier and heavier. Might have even worked too. The voice contrained and the villains were doing everything possible to stay standing against the gravity. If only you had acted on it sooner. Kagura fished coming into view just as the villains slammed into the ground, completely unable to move. Kagura, seeing that the villains were now all indisposed, looked up into a window of one of the buildings and gave a small nod before moving on. Inside the building and through the scope of her gun, Pira smiled before getting up and moving to the next window and the next target. Line break. Now that's what I call putting the pressure on. Izuku laughed while Cherry groaned. That was one thing she hated about Izuku, his goddamn horrible dad jokes. I swear he's the only person on the planet who finds that shit funny. She swore to herself. He putting the pressure on. Both of them, one in horror and the other in excitement, turned to the source of the laughter to see 13 quietly giggling to herself. No, this can't be happening, Cherry mentally screamed in her head while Izuku beamed with excitement. Finally, someone who understood good comedy. Line break. I've got you now. A villain with bare claws shouted as he charged towards Saiko, who was busy cutting down another with her rapier, only to instantly be slammed into by Kirishima. Attacking someone who's already fighting someone else isn't manly at all. The reed head roared before picking him up and throwing him into a group of charging villains. So how many more of them are there? Kirishima asked, huffing slightly from the fighting. Not sure, but this can't go forever. Saiko replied, breathing slightly heavier than her teammate. A loud scream interrupted them, and a second later someone came flying out of a window and hit the ground with a groan. What the? A chameleon? Ijiro asked as lightly kicked the villain, causing him to groan more. Hey, the two turned to see Mina sticking her head out of the window with a grin. You guys okay? That creep didn't fall on you, did he? He was trying to sneak up on me but stepped on some of the acid I created. Bastard was screaming before he even turned visible. She laughed before noticing something. Heads up, she warned, pointing out to the distance where the rest of the remaining villains were grouping together to fight together. Well, are you two ready to finish this? Saiko asked, readying herself as she raised her rapier and got into fighting position. Yeah, just tell us what to do, Kirishima said as he activated his quirk while Mina conjured some acid ready to support her team from a distance. Well then, Saiko declared. Let's show these fools why attacking UA was a mistake. Line break. Well, things seem to be going well, Aizawa muttered as he watched his students with a hint of pride. Yeah, all we gotta do is hold until. 13 was interrupted by a loud BOM as the ground shook violently as the lights flickered on and off. What's going on? Shinso yelled as Sai and Shoji made sure Kurogirly was still under control. I don't know, but Aizawa trailed off with the shaking stopping and the lights coming back on. Eraser, what was that? 13 asked, checking out the screens and seeing how some of their students were shaken by the attack but were soon back at it. Not sure, hopefully it was the principal doing what he does best, Aizawa muttered, going back to watching the students. We can only hope, 13 muttered as she and the students did the same. Line break. The sounds of thunder rumbled away in the landfall zone as the villains ran as one. Though it wasn't towards the fight. Move faster. Out away. The monster's catching up. The villains were currently in full retreat as a giant dark shadow was chasing and crashing into whatever villains it could grab. That's right, cowards, flee. It cackled in mad glee, scaring the villains out of their minds. As they were running, however, a figure came rushing into the sides before jumping straight into the villain's path, revealing itself to be Ryuko. Alright, you punks, let's see what you got, she shouted as two bright red blades appeared out of her arms before she zipped through the crowd, stopping just after leaving the crowd. And 3, 2, 1 inch. She counted down on her fingers with multiple thuds being heard afterwards. Most impressive, Tokoyami parsed as he looked over the girl's handiwork with was the group of villains now laying on the ground with multiple cuts and gashes. It was okay, but I can definitely do better. Dark Shadow boosted with Ryuko smirking and Fumikage blushing in embarrassment. Well, looks like you're going to get your chance to prove it, Ryuko challenged as she pointed her thumb over her shoulder where another group of villains were charging towards them. You're on, Dark Shadow growled as Fumikage and Ryuko charged forward ready to fight once more. Line break. Hiya, Kendo yelled, slamming her two enlarged fist into a group of villains, sending them flying off. Good job, Kendo, now 2 more on your left. The voice of Setsuna rang from an earpiece Momo had created. On it, she yelled, quickly turning around, grabbing them and slamming them into each other. Alright, Hitch, that's enough. A villain with 3 feet long nails snarled as she and 7 other villains surrounded her. Now, put your meat hands behind your head and… Bang 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 bang. Instantly all 7 villains were on their back, foaming at the mouth with tranquilizer darts in their necks. Nice, Momo. Setsuna's voice praised, causing Momo to smile as she hid behind a rock with a sniper rifle in her hands. Thank you, but we need to. A scream from Itsuki cut her off as the black-haired girl looked and to her horror saw the motorcycle lover being held by the neck by a villain with a skull mask with lighting coming out his other hand. Now that I got your attention, he called out. My demands are simple. Come out, drop the gun and take punishment like a good little hyuk. He was interrupted when he was clubbed on the back of the head, causing him to let go off Itsuki and fall to the ground, revealing the culprit to be Setsuna's floating hand wielding a crowbar. Oh yeah, Setsuna's detached head, which was watching from above, shouted with a grim. That's how we get it done. Line break. Well, looks like Class 1A's first performance is coming to a glorious close, Izuku declared, with the sounds of cheering coming from all around as all the battles were coming closer and closer to ending. 13 nodded in agreement. You all did great, and handled the situation well, she praised, getting smiles from the students. Right, now we should. Aizawa was about to give out orders when the doors to the entrance flew off before being caught by Sai's drawings. Have no fear, we are here, Almight declared, sounding confused at the end at the sight of some of his students calmly and causally watching their classmates along with 13 and Aizawa on projection screens. Ah my, it seems we're a little late, Principal Nizu remarked as he along with the rest of his staff appeared, looking around for any dangers. Principal Nizu, sir, what's the situation with the bombs? 13 asked, with her boss smiling reassuring at her. No need to worry, the threat's been taken care of. Amazing what can happen when a genius, a symbol of peace, and a robotics expert join forces, isn't it? He laughed, and 13 was about to ask what he meant by that when Recovery Girl spoke up. Enough now, is there anyone here that is injured? She asked, with Aizawa explaining the situation the best he could. At the end the rat nodded. Not bad, no, I believe we should. His suggestion would go unheard, however, when the sounds of radio static engulfed the entire building. Young Midoriya, what is the problem? Almight started to ask, only for it to finish it in a meek voice as he took in the sight of his student. The boy was twitching violently, flickering rapidly between himself and some kind of terrifying beast, his teeth linking together, and his eyes burning a bright red with dials as the pupils. Everyone, even Cherry, who had never seen him like this, was terrified but had no time to even question what could cause such a reaction like this. Help! This desperate cry instantly caught the teacher's attention, and the sight made Izuku look like nothing. Edward Elric was covered in blood with several holes still leaking out blood, his breathing as each step seemed to take everything he had. The worst part, however, was his right arm, or rather lack of, looking to have been torn off at the shoulder, and then crudely and quickly cauterized. Todoroki was flung over his shoulder, a deathly blue with ice covering his body. All Might and Recovery Girl was by their side in an instant, and seeing that help was there, the last of the blonde boy's energy seemed to leave him, causing him to collapse with the pro catching them. Young Elric, young Todoroki, All Might muttered, holding them in his arm like they were porcelain dolls as his eyes filled with tears. Who did this to you? Line break. Well, that seems to be the last of them, Ed grunted as he slammed his gauntlet into the last of the villain's guts, causing him to wheeze and hunch over. You done over there, Todoroki? He called, looking over his shoulder to his partner, seeing him breath a little heavy with his breath being visible despite the flames that surrounded them. I'm fine, the dual-haired boy confirmed as he looked over the villains he had captured with his eyes, some of which were already halfway free due to the rapidly melting ice, causing him to add another layer, freezing them up to their necks with more ice covering his body. Damn it, he thought. I managed this without using the bastard's fire, but I still need to make my mother's ice stronger, so it can handle situations like this, he thought with a grimace before turning to the blonde. Let's get out of here and meet up with the others. If each group is like this, then they're bound to be done by now, too. The dual-haired boy suggested, with the golden-eyed boy nodding with a grin. Oh ho ho, leaving so soon? But the fun's just begun. A robotic voice cackled sadistically, with the boys freezing at the sheer malice in the tone. From behind them, one of the burning buildings collapsed, knocking up a wave of dust before as two glowing, green eyes emerged in the distance. So what do you say, boys? The source of the two eyes asked again, stepping out of the dust. This amazing piece of work is by Ephialtes Dragon. Wanna play? If the two were frozen before then, now they were absolutely paralyzed. SS Shoto. Ed quivered, true fear entering his voice. Tell me that's not what I think it is. He pleaded, only for Shoto to frantically shake. There's no mistaking it. He whispered, almost afraid to be heard. My father made sure I would recognize one. He answered, his tone already defeated. It's a Robo-Fizz. Robo-Fizz, a series of robotic monstrosities modeled after a world-class assassin. These bots were responsible for the deaths of hundreds of civilians, villains, and heroes alike. Made to order and won't stop till the target's killed or the machine's destroyed. Well, boys, are we gonna do this or what? Because this thing, he said, raising up the flying creature Izuku created before causing it into paste, was no fun at all. He grinned evilly at the two boys. This snapped the two out of their funk. With Izuku's creature gone, they were effectively on their own, meaning they could either run and try and hide until backup arrived, or fight and try put this bot into the ground. Sharing a look, the two looked into the other's eyes for the briefest of seconds before giving each other a small nod of acceptance. Seconds later, Robo-Fizz was forced high into the air to avoid spikes made of ice and concrete before extending his robotic arm and twisting it around a building, the heat doing absolutely nothing to it as it sprang towards the two students at great speeds, narrowly missing them as they jumped to either side, with Robo-Fizz landing on its face before pushing its body back into the air and grabbing his feet with his hands, with spikes growing out its back before spinning on like a wheel at great speeds towards Shoto. The fire and ice user wasn't about to be hit so easily though, as with a wave of his hand another giant wave of ice was formed, diverting the killing machine onto the sides of the building before jumping to another building and heading back towards Shoto, who was preparing another wave of ice, only for a giant concrete fist to slam into Fizz and send him through several buildings. You okay, Todoroki? Ed asked, running over with a half hot and cold by nodding. I'm fine. He managed, despite the fact ice and frost were now prevalent on his arm and leg. Before he could call him out on it, the malicious laughter returned. Not bad, Shrimpy, not bad at all. The robot laughed even more so when it saw the pissed-off look on the blonde's face for the short comments. But let's see how you deal with this. It challenged before its mouth unhinged and took a giant bite out of one of the burning buildings, its checks bulging like crazy before starting to spin like a wheel towards the boys again. This time, however, a torrent of flaming shrapnel and debris towards them as well. Working together, the two managed to create a massive wall of ice and steel, forcing the robot into the air, where it dodged another massive spike of ice before landing on the other side. Oh, so close, but that only counts in horse shows. The clown laughed further, enraging the blonde. Oh yeah, you mechanical bastard, well just you wait until we rip that head off your stupid body. Ed warned, causing Frizz to laugh again. You're going to rip my head off? With a partner like that? Frizz asked, a smug smirk on its face as it pointed towards Shoto, who to Ed's horror was laying on the ground, his body completely covered in ice with his skin a pale blue. Well, looks like it's the end for him. Let's put him out of his misery. He cackled before firing off another round towards the downed boy. Ed watched all of this in slow motion, the words of his teacher blaring through his ears. None of you are allowed to die. Do whatever it takes to survive. Sorry, Mr. Aizawa, but it looks like I may not be able to follow that order, Ed thought, rushing to protect his classmate. There was no time to throw up a barrier, no time to throw him out of the way or anything else logical. The only thing he could do is place himself in front of the downed boy and waited for the barrage. The pain was unlike anything he had ever felt. Burning and razor-sharp shrapnel tore through him, with blood bursting out of the newly created holes in his torso. However, he kept silent, biting his lip the hardest he ever had. He glared defiantly at the laughing robot, refusing to give it the satisfaction of hearing him scream. Shoto could only watch in horror as Ed fell onto all fours with the robot standing above him, laughing and gloating. I could do it, he's distracted. Shoto thought. If I use my left side. He thought with more than a little scorn. I swore I would never use it. He continued to stare at his left hand. But if Elric is willing to do this for me, he thought, a heat starting to gather in his arm. Then I can do this for him, he thought as flames started to flicker on his arm. Good Shoto, finally done with your little rebellion. At the moment everything seemed to melt away as the fire surrounding him gathered and morphed until it was in a giant, monstrous version of his bastard father's face. You finally accepted your mother's ice wasn't good enough, that SHU wasn't good enough. The voice seemed to mock. Shut up, shut up, shut up, Shoto screamed in his head at the monster, knowing full well his father wasn't actually there but still felt his anger boil. My mother was and is and always will be far greater than you could ever be, he roared at the flames, getting mocking laughter in return. Superior to me? Me? The woman who did nothing as I brainwashed her parents with empty lies. The woman who let me abuse and discard your worthless older siblings while doing nothing to help them, especially that worthless prototype Toyua. The flames continued to laugh, with Shoto growing angrier and angrier with each word and knew what was coming next. The very woman who attacked and permanently scared the only child that still foolishly loved her and who has yet to visit her in that mental hospital I put her in to this very day. At that instant nothing mattered to Shoto Todoroki more than to get rid of the monster in front of him, so with an inhuman roar the area was covered in ice. The result was nothing but Shoto laying exhausted on the ground and the fire looking down at him in disdain as it started to fade. Foolish child, you should know that ice is worthless against me just like she was. He continued even when half of him was gone, having just enough time to send one final message. You my fire, Shoto, and save that worthless classmate of yours and prove you're better than him and all the rest of your classmates. It's what you were created for. And like that, Shoto was back on the ground with Ed kneeling in front of him with that damn clown still laughing. Looking at his left arm, he felt nothing but disgust as he slowly put it down and felt the rest of his fight and energy leaving him as the world started to grow dark. I'm so sorry, Alaric. He thought his last sight that of his partner spewing blood but looking at him and calling out to him in concern. I'm sorry. And with that, Shoto lost consciousness. Todoroki, wake up, man! The blonde shouted, forcing himself to his feet as he struggled over to Boy and started to shake him to get him to wake up. You know, I saw the way he looked at the left hand of his. The robot commented, seeing the blonde shake the dual-haired boy and coming up with a new way to torment him. And if he hates it as much as I think he does, it continued before its eyes narrowed and its teeth shined with malice. Why don't I just rip it off him? Ed was encased at the offer. Don't you dare! He shouted and's about to try and attack again when suddenly he was grabbed by the murderous bot. Hey, now don't be like that, it's for his good. It contrained in a fake sweet tone that made Edward want to hurl. That being said, if I'm going to take his left hand? It said as it wrapped its left and around the blonde's right, and Edward's eyes widened in horror as he realized what was about to happen. It's only fair I take your right. In one swift motion, the robot pulled Edward's right arm clean off his body, and this time Ed couldn't contain his scream of pain. There it is! Fizz shouted in triumph before tossing the boy into a wall, talking a stop sign with him. The boy was barely conscious at this point with the robot standing above him. Now you stay right here, and I'll be right back, K. Shumkums? The robot cackled as he slowly stalled over to the downed Todoroki. Ed watched with half-lidded eyes. Come on, think, his life is on the line, you need to think. He thought desperately before looking down in defeat as he noticed his new arm fall, gushing blood. Who am I trying to fool? There's nothing I can do. He thought, growing more and more hopeless. Especially when I can't use my quirk anymore. He thought bitterly as he stared at his now thrown away right hand before closing his eyes. His last sight, a single spark of lighting flowing through his remaining hand as his eyes fully closed. Wait a minute, Edward thought, his eyes shooting open. I can still use my quirk, or at least part of it, he thought, his mind clearing as a plan started to take shape. My alchemy is a two-step process, destruction and reconstruction. I may need both hands for the reconstruction, but maybe. He thought before wincing at the blood still running from his open socket. Gotta stop that first. He thought before looking over at the stop sign. That will work. Putting a piece of discarded metal in his mouth, he picked up the sai and pushed it against the wound, screaming through the metal as he did so until he was sure the wound had been cauterized. Shakily and with a massive feeling of nausea now present, Ed dropped the sai and spit out the metal. Raising his left hand, he gained a determined look on his face. "It's now or never," he declared before rushing forward. The robot didn't even have time to react, too busy in its thoughts and torture, and sure of its victory, it never noticed Ed approach until the young man had grabbed the machine's head. "What the?" it yelled, but it was too late because with one final shout Ed pushed his quirk to its limits, and the result was the robot being blown to scrap metal. Ed didn't seem to fully process the remains of "there would be killer" was raining from the sky, or the fact that the villains that are thought enough were looking at them in terror. All that mattered was getting him and his partner to safety. So with one final push of Herculean strength, and Ed threw Todoroki over his shoulders and made his way to the others. Line break. After that, the USJ incident was practically over. The teachers all left to go help their students deal with the reaming villains as Almight and Recovery Girl raised Ed and Shoto to her office for treatment. Both Cherry and Izuku watched this with frowns. "Not going to offer to help Izuku?" she asked quietly, not her usual self from seeing her classmates like this. "I don't have anything that can heal something like that. Jiru was one thing, but this is out of my depths." Izuku admitted, not speaking in his usual mannerisms, nor his radio voice showing just how affected he was at seeing people he already considered friends like this. Cherry did nothing but wrap her arm around her taller friend, trying to confront him as both prayed to however was listening for a miracle. Line break. Tamura Shigaraki was in a world of pain he had never known as he laid on a hospital bed wrapped head to toe in medical gauze and casts. "How is he, doctor?" Sensei asked, standing above him, his tone calm as always, which pissed the would-be off at the lack of care his master seemed to show him. "Well, he'll live, that's about it." He shrugged. Now there's really nothing more he can note at this point, getting a growl from the young villain alerting both older man to his awakening. "Oh, Tamura, you're awake, I see, that's wonderful." For a second Shigaraki felt nothing but happiness at hearing that from his master. "Tell me, were you able to get an answer from Izuku Midoriya?" And there was his rage building again. Of course that's all Master cared about, of course that's what he wanted to know. Izuku bucking Midoriya. Barely managing to control himself, he answered. "He said he never heard of one for all." Tamura answered, getting a sigh of relief from both his sensei and the doctor. "That's marvelous news," Sensei said, sounding more relieved than Tamura had ever heard him as he turned around and headed for the door. "Well, doctor, I leave him in your capable hands," he said, and was about to leave when Tamura called out. "Wait a minute, master, please, what is one for all?" He pleaded, desperate to now know what his sensei was keeping from him. All he got was a chuckle in return. "In due time, Tamura Shigaraki, in due time." And with that he was gone, leaving Shigaraki to stew in rage and jealousy. Line break. UA was closed the next 2 days as the teachers held meetings as well as made sure all threats to the school were gone. During these 2 days, Izuku and Cherry not only filled Bakugo in on what actually happened but spent most of their time with Angel and telling him what happened as well. The boy took it in stride, and although he was genuinely worried at first when he heard about on the news seeing his friends unharmed and acting normal, for the most part did take away a lot of that stress. Even more so when he heard how much ass they actually kicked. However, he was still kinda nervous about the two. Apparently 2 of their classmates got hurt real bad and there was really nothing they could do, and for the first time Angel could relate. Having been to exactly 0 lessons and having no idea how to counsel someone, the best he could do was support his friends and wait for them to be ready to take about it. Line break. Classes were back in session, and the students were back in class, with each student sitting in class quietly and waiting for class to start, with some of them taking quick glances at the 2 empty desks in the room before facing the forward and looking towards the door expectantly. This was the sight Aizawa came into. Not like I can blame them, he thought with a sigh before standing in front of them. "Alright, I've got a lot to say, but first let's go over what I know you're all concerned about," he told them, getting right down to business as he shuffled through the papers he brought. Regarding Edward Elric, he started and noticed everyone tense up, no doubt expecting the worst. Which is why it came as a shock to all when their teacher smiled. "Edward Elric will be rejoining us next week," he declared, truly enjoying the looks of shock, disbelief, joy, and relief that spread to the faces of his students. In an instant, every hand in the class went up. Luckily, he came prepared for that too. Don't misunderstand, his injuries were very severe and under any other circumstances would have died if not for his father. Aizawa clarified, confusing the class even more. And his father is? Cherry motioning with her hand for him to get on with it, something that annoyed him, but he let it go. Van Hohenheim, he answered, and some of his class felt they were going to faint. Van Hohenheim was the greatest doctor in the world, nicknamed the miracle worker. People say there's no one he can't treat. For him to be Edward's father was mind-blowing. So what about his missing arm? Momo asked, concerned, doubtful that even the greatest doctor could reach an arm without any problems arising. Eraser just waved the concerns off. Don't worry, Principal Niza said it was taken care. Don't know the full details myself, but Niza said something about an old friend and Island. He muttered once again, shocking the class and creating more questions, but Aizawa had already moved on. As for Shoto Todoroki, he began, and the class knew it was going to be bad considering his tone was colder than they'd ever heard it, and a few of them felt like they knew what was about to be said. And honestly, they felt it was for the best. Due to his unacceptable behavior at the USJ and his suspected degenerating mental health. Aizawa spoke in a tone that showed he took no pleasure from what he was about to say, and only did it because it needed to be done. Shoto Todoroki has been removed from Class 1A. A new stage. In celebration to Hell of a Boss returning soon, here's this. They're taking this remarkably well. Aizawa noted as he looked over the class, whose reactions seemed to be varying from uncaring and cherry to sad but accepting. Many of them not liking this, but understood that something like this couldn't be allowed to happen again where they may not be so lucky. Then again, anyone's reaction would be surprised compared to Endeavor. Eraser had thought back to the meeting he had with the number 2 hero. Flashback. As you can see, your son's actions, or rather lack of action, was less than what was required of him during the attack. And while we can see that it does seem like it's due to some mental issues as seen by the expression on his face, I'm afraid we can't wait for him to work those issues out and let him remain in Class 1A. Both due to the fact that his classmates will pull ahead of him, and due to the fact that this mentally is unacceptable in the field. Principal Niza finished his explanation to the flame hero, who sat next to his son, who had his head down in self-loathing and regret. By the unknown animal's side sat Eraserhead, and Almight ready to step in should the flame hero go on a rampage, as he tired to justify his son's actions. To his surprise, the man just sat there in silence, not taking his eyes, not moving off his son on the screen as the fight between the robot clown and Shoto and his classmate. Watching over and over again as his son absolutely refused to use his flame, resulting in the Elric boy getting severely wounded, even losing his arm in the process. And when it finally looked he was going to use his fire, couldn't bring himself to do it, leaving Elric to cauterize his arm before destroying the robot on what was really no more than a sneak attack and a whole hell of a lot of luck. Young Elric is acutely expected to make a complete and speedy recovery thanks to his father Van Hohenheim. Now this did surprise the older Todoroki, having heard of the legendary doctor and his miracle-like work. Niza, seeing the man's surprise, gave a small nod. Yes, turns out his quirk is very much like his son's own, allowing him to heal almost every injury save for his arm, which is being taken care by an outside party. Niza said, and could see much of the tension leaving the fire and ice user's smolders. That does not mean, however, that Shoto Todoroki will be allowed to remain in Class 1A. Aizawa was quick to jump in to make sure there was no misunderstanding about what was about to happen. If it were up to me, your son would be expelled and blacklisted. The underground hero snarled before huffing. But some people, he said, glaring at the other 2 educators in the room, believed he deserved a second change, so he'll be moved to Class 1B instead. The underground hero finished getting nods from the 2. We believe that if young Shoto can overcome his demons, he can become an amazing hero, and the best place to do that is the lower stress environment, that is Class B. Almight said, speaking for the first time in the meeting. Yes, indeed. However, if Shoto shows he cannot overcome his issues enough to use his full power, then we'll have no choice but to remove him from the hero course. This is his last chance. Do keep that in mind, will you? The principal asked, with Shoto looking up for the first time during the meeting, with his answer very short. Yes, sir. Flashback end. Still, it went better than I thought it would, Aizawa said before shaking his head and getting his class back on track. Now then, moving on. None of you should relax yet because the fight's far from finished. Aizawa finished cryptically, getting looks of distress from his students. Come on, most of the class thought, terrified they would have to face more villains so soon. However, that fear was gone with their teacher's next statement. It's time for the yearly UA Sports Festival, Aizawa announced, and like that, noise filled the room as cheers rang out. Oh, hell yeah, time to show everyone what I can do, Eijiro shouted, his fist in the air ready to unleash his manliness. Kicking people's ass on live. Oh yeah, this is gonna be sweet, Cherry added on. The contests, the drive, the passion, the fear of failure, truly this is the very essence of entreatment. Izuku cheered with war cries being heard behind him, his eyes going crazy as he imagined what was to come. Enough. And like Aizawa brought everyone back to reality as he glared. That's enough now, don't forget what the sports festival is actually about. He warned, though it was as everyone knew what the UA Sports Festival was. The entire thing took 6 days to complete, with each of the 3 years taking 2 days to complete. The first years took the first 2 days, the second years took the next 2, with the third years taking the final 2, with classes being cancelled during the whole week. Even though it's usually just the hero course students and the rare add-on from general studies or support course. Seeing the looks, Aizawa nodded. It's good you understand, but remember this, out of everyone here you lot have the most to lose. Aizawa warned, getting worried looks from some of the class. It's true, if at any time during the sports festival we feel you're not living up to the standards of G advanced class, then you'll be instantly demoted to class 1B at the least. He warned, giving one last glare to his class as the bell that signaled the end of homeroom as he made his way to the door. Keep that in mind before you do anything too stupid. Line break. The sports festival, finally time to show all these extras their place. Bakugo laughed as he, Cherry and Izuku headed towards the cafeteria for lunch. Hell yeah, I can't wait to see what kind of batshit crazy trials the rat has in store for us. Cherry laughed as she recalled watching all the insane challenges of the sports festival on TV the previous years. Oh yes, indeed, a truly marvelous stage. It truly is a shame most of our first-year fellows will choose to sit it out, Izuku told his friends. The sports festival, while an amazing way to show their worth to pro heroes, only required the hero course students to participate. General, business, and support courses, while encouraged to participate, rarely chose to do so, often choosing sit out and focus all their attention on the cultural festival. Bakugo and Cherry, hearing this, rolled their eyes, or eye in Cherry's case. Yeah, we know Deku, Katsuki muttered under his breath. Indeed, in fact, Izuku suddenly started to stutter uncontrollably as a loud blast radio static suddenly was heard, causing Cherry and Bakugo to turn and see what caused their normally composed friend to act in such a manner. A second later, however, they had to bite their tongues to stop themselves from laughing at the sight of their friend, shaking and twitching violently, his eyes becoming that of radio dials and spinning widely. However, that wasn't what caused them to laugh. No, it was the sight of a girl a couple years older than them playing with Izuku's antlers like they were her favorite toy. Oh wow, they do move on their own, she gasped in amazement before patting Izuku's hair. And your hair is just so fluffy, she continued on before suddenly grabbing him into a hug and started to rub her cheek against the younger man's own. Both Cherry and Katsuki looked at each other, not even bothering to hide their amusement, before finally deciding to be merciful on their friend, if only because they were wasting their lunch time. Okay, that's enough, our friend here kinda has a thing about being touched, Cherry told the girl as she tried to pull the older girl off her friend. The older girl gasped. Oh, I'm so sorry, she said, instantly letting go of Izuku, who wasted no time in teleporting behind Bakugo and using him as a human shield to hide from the now dubbed in his mind she-devil. It's fine, things like this need to happen for him to grow as a person, Cherry told her helpfully, shooting Izuku a smirk while resulting in the flattest look he had ever given her. The older girl's guilty expression instantly turned to happy and eagerness. If that's the case, I'll hug him every time I see him. And now the flat expression became horror. I'm Cherry Boom, and that's Bakugo Katsuki. He indicated towards the ashen blonde, who grunted in greeting. And the fluffy one is Izuku Midoriya. she said, introducing the three of them while the older girl beamed. Nice to meet you three, I'm Nijire Hado. However, something seemed to click in Hado's mind and she instantly approached Cherry and Izuku. Wait a minute, I know the names Cherry and Midoriya. Yeah, you're two of the students that fought at the USJ, she said before her eyes lit up. So that means you two are Hero Course students, right? Class 1A? Nijire asked, getting nods from the two. That's so cool, I'm in 3A, she said, causing the three to go wide-eyed as she turned to Bakugo. And you in 1A too? She asked, with Bakugo shaking his head. 1B. He answered, not really bothered answering, conserving while some in the advanced course are hecklers. The girl in front of him looks like she'd bawl her eyes out for hurting a fly. And like he suspected, she was all smiles. That's amazing, you know me and a couple of him friends started in 1B before being promoted to the A class, she said, shocking the ashen blonde, but before he could ask anything she was already moving on. So are you all excited about the sports festival? Are you nervous about making a good impression on the pros? What kind of events do you think you'll be facing? What are you hoping they'll be? Who are you hoping to impress so you can intern under them? Nijire started to ask a series of rapid-fire questions without letting them answer, causing Bakugo to grow more and more annoyed. However, before he could go off on her, she suddenly clapped her hands together with a happy cheer. Aizu, she said, launching forward, grabbing the undead teen into a hug and twirling him around, with Izuku doing everything he could to stop himself from going ballistic. Mercifully, she finally stopped, but that didn't mean she let him go. Instead, she held him while floating in the air. Aizu, how would you like to come intern at the Ryukyu agency? She asked, causing the undead teen to snap and give Hado his full attention. Seeing this, Nijire continued. I'm doing a work study with her, and I could throw in a good word for you, she offered. Principal Niza had chosen to show the footage of the USJ to 3A that morning, and it was all starting to come back to her that what she saw of Cherry and Izuku. And she also recalled that Ryukyu was looking for someone with versatility to join. Yeah, you can learn from one of the best in Japan, and I can hug you each and every day. We'll be besties by the end of the week, Nijire promised, causing Izuku to somehow go even paler than he already was. Well, a tempting offer, my dear, but it really all depends on if Lady Ryukyu would want me as an intern, Izuku reminded her, though Nijire's beaming smile didn't fall in the slightest. Not a problem. If you're as awesome in the sports festival as you were in the USJ, then I know she'll send you one, so what do you say? Will you accept if she sends you one? Hado asked happily, and Izuku, seeing no other options with his friends offering nothing more than smirks and shrugs. Of course, my dear, it's a deal, Izuku said, and in happiness Nijire flew around with before sitting him down. Yeah, this is going to be so much fun. I'm going to call Ryukyu right now and tell her I found her next intern by about to be besties friends. And with that, Nijire flew off, leaving the 3 first years alone. Slowly, the undead turned to the 2 other teens who were seconds away from bursting, while Izuku slid on a rare scowl. Not a word, he told them as he continued to march on the way to the cafeteria. There were many words. Line break. The trio had finally made it to the cafeteria and were about to enter when loud laughter echoed from the corner. Young Bakugo is here with friends. Almight laughed as he peeked out from around the corner, causing the students to stare in awe and whisper to each other as the number 1 hero approached the trio. Bakugo meanwhile was scowling. That damn idiot, he thought with gritted teeth as he felt the eyes of Izuku, Cherry as well as several others on him at being called out by name by the symbol of peace. And the stares only got worse as Almight approached the trio. Greetings, little rookies, I trust everyone is doing well today? He asked, getting nods and confirmations from the trio, getting a thumbs up from the number 1. Almight sensei, my good man, did you require something from our dear friend Bakugo here, considering you called him out by name? Izuku asked with a head tilt while sending a small smirk towards Bakugo, unseen by all except Bakugo, who scowled, and Cherry, who covered her mouth with her hand to cover her laughter. Indeed I did, but first I wanted to speak with the 2 of you as well, if that alright? Almight asked, getting the 2 to look at each other before shrugging. Lead the way, teach, Cherry told the pro, who led the 3 away from prying ears. Once the 3 students and 1 teacher were sure they were alone, Almight was able to talk freely. Now first I would like to once again apologize for my absence at the USJ a few days ago. I had a responsibility to you children as your teacher, and yet I choose to instead engage in hero matters that were already being handled by other pros. Almight apologized, his head bowed low to two of the students he felt he had failed. The USJ, that was going to be a date that would haunt the symbol of peace until the day he died. He was supposed to be focusing more on teaching these days, and Japan was growing more and more peaceful each and every day as more and more outstanding heroes emerge each and every day. So why did he feel the need to intervene in each and every case that he came across? Was it because a small, dark part of him believed only he could truly save the day and the other heroes? Could it be he was trying to do as much as he could because he knew he was already on dwindling time since passing one for all on to young Bakuga? Or maybe, just maybe, he was terrified that even the smallest of crimes, as small as stealing a candy bar, could all be part of some master plan to destroy Heroes Society orchestrated by the incarnation of evil himself, all for one. Almight instantly banished such thoughts from his head. That monster was burning in hell where he belonged. Regardless of the reason, it nearly exhausted his time for the day, and his students were the ones to suffer for it. Young Alaric being the one to suffer the most, losing his arm and almost his life while defending his teammate. This had been a wake-up call to All Might, and showed him he needed to focus more on his students, and let the other heroes take more of the cases while he slowly eases up so the country is better prepared for his retirement. Don't worry about it, Teach. Cherry's casual dismal of his absence tore through his mindset, and he gasped in shock at his young student, even more so when young Midoriya nodded his head. Indeed, the life of a pro hero is a strenuous one, never mind that of the number one and symbol of peace. Gasping silently, the symbol of peace turned towards his young protege, who could only offer a shrug and smirk as if to say, "What can you do? These kids." All Might thought with a shake of his head and a small chuckle. Moving on, I would also like to talk about your action during the USJ, or more specifically when the two of you went up against the leaders of the attack. The pro hero continued on as he looked towards the two with a serious expression. Now I understand that the two of you have plans to become evil heroes when you graduate, correct? He asked, getting nods from the two first years. Izuku had never hidden the fact he was going to become an evil hero since he made it into UA, and although she had never said anything, it wasn't hard to guess Cherry was planning the same. I see. Well, I won't ask for your reasons. Everyone has their own after all, and it's not my place to question them. All Might sighed before looking at them with the most serious expression he could muster. All I can say is that should you do indeed fully commit to that path, then you must remember what it is they do and why you do it. All Might warned the two, with Izuku's face going blank and Cherry gaining a serious expression of her face as both of them nodded. The two had spent countless hours doing research going over the job as well as the history of the job. There had been countless nut jobs and psychos who got the job only to leave oceans of bloods in their wake before they were taken down. All Might had actually caused the need and number of evil heroes to decease drastically, but they were still needed despite their bad reputation. Hell, the two hadn't even told their parents that they planned to do this yet. We are well aware of what could happen should we go down this path. To our foes, our families, and ourselves. As well as the toll it takes on those that choose to pursue it. Izuku told the symbol of peace. Yeah, All Might, this wasn't done on the whim, but someone's got to do it, and we've put a lot of thought into this. Believe me, we're not going to go into this looking to see if who can kill someone in the craziest way possible. Cherry promised the pro, who after a moment nodded. I know, your performance and the restraint you showed in during the USJ was proof enough of that. The pro hero told the pair, having seen along with the rest of the staff the footage of the USJ, and had been more than impressed with the class and especially the two in front of him. Deciding to change topics, he turned to Bakugo. Now then, young Bakugo. The pro began, and suddenly the Class B student felt a chill run down his back, and it only grew when he saw the man bring out a box lunch. Want to eat with me? Katsuki simply stood frozen, even as Cherry burst into laughter so hard she had to hold her sides before slowly tilting his head in order to see Deku. Deku hadn't made much of a reaction, thought there was a reaction, and it made Bakugo suddenly regret messing with Deku after their encounter with the third year. Deku's response was to simply tilt his head to the side, look down at him, and have his smile grow a little bigger, but told Bakugo enough. Revenge would be served, and it would be merciless. Line break. The end of the day had finally arrived and Class 1A was and most of the class was prepared to head home. The two of you have to head to the faculty room? Is it because of your class rep positions? Saiko asked both Izuku and Tsu as they prepared to leave. No, but we have to fill out the forms so we could use some of our support gear, the frog girl said, holding up her lily pad watch with Izuku nodding. Indeed, and while I have too many fine objects to fill forms for, I do admit I will feel better with my handy mic by my side, Izuku said, summoning his signature weapon. Those listening nodded in understanding, but when they opened the door they were met with a wall of 29 teens blocking their door. Well, look who finally decided to join the rest of common folks. An annoying voice emerged from the crowd and was revealed to be the blonde boy who was always glaring and muttering under his breath. Oh, it's you! Izuku exclaimed like he was getting an old friend, which was countered when the undead teen tilted his head to the side. Who are you again? I'm Nito Monama from Class 1B, the now named Nito shouted at the undead teen. Izuku paused and made to look like he was trying to remember him before finally snapping his fingers with a Uraraka kind of moment. Nope, still no idea. Monama growled, but before he could say any more a classmate of his spoke up. Apologies for Sir Monama behavior, Sir Izuku, it's a work in progress. Jirota Shishida, class representative of his class, apologized to his fellow rep who waved it off. Oh, no trouble at all, my good man, all classes have their little issues after all, Izuku told the beast quirk user before spotting a familiar purple-haired girl. Oh, Ms. Jiru, it truly is wonderful to see you today. Tell how goes your studies? He asked, getting a smirk from her, as she made out the more annoyed faces on some of her classmates' faces. They're all going alright, I guess. UA is as tough as it's expected. Can't imagine what you guys are going through in 1A. She said, a little uneasy since she wasn't the best in school. Oh, each and every day is just one exciting performance after the next. Truly it exceeds all of my hopes and dreams, Izuku proclaimed, waving his hands in a wide gesture. Well, that's cool. Kyoka smirked before frowning. So are you doing okay? After the USJ, I mean. We all saw the footage, included on why Todoroki changed classes. Kyoka was looking straight at Izuku when she had said this, and for a moment she had thought she had seen something. Something primal, something otherworldly, and most of all something angry. And then it was gone, and Izuku had just gave a tried sigh, but still with a small smile. That is a touchy subject, Ms. Jiru, and one at this moment in time I'm afraid I'm not exactly ready to share at the moment. Izuku apologized, and the earjack girl nodded in understanding. Oh, yeah, totally get it. Just know that if you want to talk about it to someone, I'm always willing to lend an ear, she offered, with Izuku giving a thankful nod. Well, if that will be all, Tsuyu, and I really must be going. Papers to sign and all of that. Izuku excused himself, and his vice rep as they made their way to the faculty office. Wait, damn monster, we're not done talking, you damn monster! Monama shouted, not noticing the darkening faces of Class 1A at the monster comment. Yeah, you smug bastard, don't think you can ignore us now just because you fought some villains. We've still got some things we want to talk to you guys about. Tetsu shouted off towards the unmanly dear teen who, from what heard from a few of his classmates, screwed over so many other people out of their dreams of becoming heroes. So unmanly? Oh, I think you've said plenty. One Tokoemi told them, and when Class 1B glanced over to argue, their voices caught in their throats. Each and every member of Class A was glaring darkly at them. Not the kind of glare between two rivals. No, this was a glare that warned them if they started something, 1A would have no problem finishing it. Is this a result of being attacked during the USJ? Just what exactly happened to cause them to glare like that? These were the thoughts going through Class 1B thoughts as they subconsciously took a step back. Now that that's over with, kidney, move aside so we can leave, Kagura requested coldly, causing many to gulp. And if we don't? Tagura Kamakiri asked stubbornly, only to flinch back as Cherry produced 2 bombs. Then we make you? She responded in a tone that promised pain. Quickly, Class 1B moved to the side. Even the strict Ida was more than a little intimidated and allowed the class to pass them without incident. And it wasn't until Class 1A as a whole left their line of sight did 1B breathe a sigh of relief. I told you idiots this was a bad idea, Bakuga said, standing at the end of the hall looking bored. The fact alone that you're jealous that you didn't get the chance to fight for your life proves just how unfit for this line of work you are. Bakuga muttered before heading for the exit, leaving most of the class to glare at Yuga, Ida, and the other confrontational members of their class. It had been their idea in the first place to confront and interrogate Class 1A in the first place. Line break. And one more signature there and you should be good to go, Midnight said as she took the forms from Izuku and Tsu so she could get them processed in time for the sports festival. Izuku, grinning as always, turned to Tsu. Well, my friend, shall we go? He asked, and with a nod the two headed for the exit. This is a surprise, young Midoriya and young Azuri. Stopping, the two turned to a blonde, hired skeletal-looking man with sunken blue eyes and a bit of blood leaking from his lips. He had a panicked look on his face, and the rest of the teachers were looking at him with alarm or annoyance. Aizawa in particular looked ready to strangle him. I'm sorry, do we know you? Tsuyu asked, placing her finger to her chin as she tried to place the man before her. Well, no, it's just I'm Almight's secretary Tashinori Yagi. The man introduced himself. See, I'm the homeroom teacher of Class 1C, but before the year started I helped Almight memorize the names and faces of all of his students. The man told the two, with the frog girl nodding in understanding and acceptance of the answer. Izuku, however, narrowed her eyes and scratched his chin as he leaned in close, causing the man to gulp and lean back. Apologizes, sir, but I can't help but feel we've met somewhere before, Izuku told the man, trying to place where he had seen him before. Because we have, Yagi blurted out. A little over a year ago, remember? The sludge innocent? He asked, and after a moment Izuku snapped his fingers with a look of realization on his face, causing the blonde man to breath out in relief. Seeing this, Tsuyu decided to take mercy on the man. Izuku, we should really get going. We've got a lot of training to do before the sports festival, Tsuyu said towards her friend, who nodded. Too true, my friend, he told her before facing the man. A real pleasure meeting you, sir. We must talk again sometime, he told the man, who barely managed to nod as the boy left the room with Tsuyu right behind him. Once they were gone, Yagi breathed out a sigh of relief. Young Bakuga wasn't kidding when he said young Midoriya could be intense. I already saw part of that during the battle trials and the footage of the USJ, but still, he thought before turning around, and nothing. All the rest of the staff were glancing towards him in annoyance and exasperation. What? He asked a little defensively. I had a lot on my mind and wasn't expecting them to be here. He tried to defend himself while the rest of the staff just shocked their heads or groaned. Seriously, how did Almight keep the secret for this long? Line break. In the blink of an eye, the sports festival had arrived. The stadium was filled, and President Mike and a very reluctant Aizawa were ready to start commentating. Currently, Class 1A were in the waiting room ready to be called and were doing their best to fight the nerves that were eating away at them. Well, time to finally show the world what the new Class 1A can do, Nina said with a nervous smile. Gotta admit, kinda wish we got to wear our costumes. She finished with nervous laugh as many nodded in agreement, having felt more confident in their hero outfits. Izuku, however, was still all smiles. Now don't be like that, Ashido. Costume or not, you're all more than skilled enough to stand on such a grand stage, he declared, with wild cheering being heard in the background. Hearing this, small smiles came to the faces of Class 1A, with each of them gaining a determined look in their eyes. Yeah, let's do this thing, a newly returned Edward Elric shouted before smashing two fists together, resulting in loud clang sound and draw everyone's attention to Ed's new arm. Apparently a friend of his named Winery, who studies on one island, used a chunk newly discovered metal she had won in a contest to forge it for the young Alaric. And Ed showed his right to be in Class 1A because after only a couple days of practice he was able to use it along with his quirk with little issue. A knock on their door suddenly gained everyone's attention, with an attendant stepping in. Class 1A, it's time, they said simply before leaving, causing Izuku to stand. Well, everyone, he said, gaining their attention as he spread his arms. It's showtime. Line break. Well, sports fans, it's that time again, time for the yearly sports festival, President Mike said with a grin in the commentator booth, along with Aizawa, who was wondering how the voice hero talked him into this. Like always, we're starting with the first years, so let's bring them out now, he said as the students started to come out. First up, they're the rising stars of UA and recently fought off their first villain attack. It's Class 1A. Mike cheered along with the audience going wild as the class fully emerged from their gate. It's a lot louder than I thought it'd be, Shinso muttered as he started to sweat lightly. Eyes on the prize, Satoshi, eyes on the prize. Cherry muttered, more determined to win than ever. Next, while they not be the advanced course, they have more than enough to make it as heroes. It's Class 1B. Mike continued on as the larger class walked out. You know, that wasn't such a bad introduction. Juzo muttered as he and the rest of the Class 1B took their positions. One thing that the B class did notice was that the heroes seemed to be cheering a little louder for them than they had for Class 1A. A little indication to see who went where, huh? Bakuga thought with a smirk. And finally, she may not be in the hero course, but underestimate her at your own peril from the support course. It's Mei Hatsum. Present. Mike finished his instruction with the pink-haired girl entered with a wave. 52 students total, huh? Aizawa asked, counting them up. Not bad, he muttered with Mike smirking. I know, right? She asked before going back to commentating. And now the umpire for the first years, it's the R-rated hero Midnight, Mike said as the fans, or more especially most of the men and a few women, went crazy as the hero art history teacher appeared on stage. I'll make sure any rule breakers are properly punished, she said with a wink, only causing a wilder reaction than before. And now for the student pledge, so will Izuku Midoriya please come on stage? Midnight asked, with Izuku heading towards the podium as cheers rang through the stadium. Gently taking the mic from Midnight, Izuku was silent for a brief moment. I am a man of few words, so I'll keep this brief. While many were surprised that what sounds like an old-timely radio voice was coming in clearly formed the mics, those that knew Izuku snorted. He was not a man of few words by any means. First, to those that choose not to participate and simply wish to observe along with the audience, I say kick back, relax and enjoy the soon-to-be slaughter. Your time to shine is during the cultural festival, and if the past years were any indication, this year is going to be just as grand as those before it. Izuku spoke with a laugh while the non-hero course blinked in surprise. It was rare for any non-hero course student to compete in the sports festival, and every year the student representative always claims it was a shame they were too cowardly to compete with the hero courses. So to hear the representative actually tell them to simply enjoy watching but also acknowledge their roles in the cultural festival was refreshing and a little reassuring. Next to my fellows competing in the festival and plan on competing with everything they have, I wish you good fortune and happy hunting in this spectacular new stage we find ourselves on, he said as the sounds of cheering trumpets as well as cheers were heard in the background by everyone, with most from the stadium joining in the cheering, while those that were planning go all out from the start were more determined to do well. And finally, to those who planned to hold back until the right time, Izuku mocked with air quotes before sighing tiredly and shaking his head regretfully before looking at the competitors with both mock pity and sadness. At least try to be a little entertaining before getting kicked out by the real heroes, he said before handing the mic to the Midnight, with a confused silence filling the air at the last part. Wanting to move on, Present Mike moved on. And now to explain how the first day of the sports festival works. There are two events held today, a group challenge and an individual challenge. Those who make it past today will get to compete in the tournament tomorrow, Mike explained. And now let's hand it over to Midnight to start this thing. Midnight, if you will, Mike spoke with a cheering crowd. Happily, Mike, and now let's get this party started, so open it up, Midnight ordered, and suddenly the center opened wide as a massive structure was lifted out of the opening. Everyone watched as the palace sat ominously in the center as 13 staircases rose to connect to the structure. Alright people, the name of the game is called Pandemonium. Everyone will split into teams of 4 and be assigned one of the staircases. Once the game begins, the students will race up the staircase and into the castle, which we stacked full of villain robots that will be worth a variety of points, Midnight began to explain, and a lot of Hiyue's students couldn't help but think of the entrance exam. Now you're all competing to get to the center, but keep in mind that you must defeat enough villain to earn 250 points. Only then will you be able to complete the game. And now just a couple of rules. A team must be complete to finish the challenge, meaning no leaving any team members behind, got it? Next, absolutely under no circumstances are you allowed to sabotage or prevent another team from advancing beyond minor injuries that will heal in a couple days, Midnight roared, sounding more serious that they've heard her that day before. She grinned. And with that, let the 15-minute team formations begin, she suddenly invoked, with 15 minutes appearing on the screen, which immediately started to count down. Almost instantly everyone went into a scramble to find the right team. Izuku, however, was looking relaxed as ever and turned to see two others glancing around as well. "Tokoemi, my good friend, care to join forces?" he offered, getting a smirk from the again-headed teen. "Revelry in the dark," was all he said, getting a nod from Izuku. "Indeed," he said before turning to the other one standing there. "And what say you, Mizo, my good man? Care to join forces? Could be a good way to get to know each other?" The multi-armed boy nodded. "Sounds like plan," he said with a smirk, causing Izuku to clap. "Excellent, and I know just who I want for our last team member," Izuku cheered before looking around. "And there she is," Izuku announced before waving his hand in the air. "Oh, Ms. Gyro over here," he called out with the earjack girl came over to them confused and slightly skeptical. "Why'd you call me over here? You can't seriously want me for your team, can you?" she asked with Izuku instantly nodding. "Why not? All four of us are now scouts, and we each have the range covered. Mizo handles short range, yourself can handle short and mid-range, while Fumikage specializes in long range, and I'm an all-rounder." Izuku finished his explanation with the other three looking towards each other before nodding. Looks like they had a team. "Well, looks like we're about to see how great you are now that you actually have to play far," Monama mocked as he, Ida, the blonde-haired boy from the entrance exam, and the pink-cheeked girl from the exam approached him. "What Monama means is that now with these new strict rules you will be unable to act in an unheroic fashion like you did in the entrance exam," Ida declared with Izuku tilting his head to the side in consideration before gaining and nodding. "All right then, challenge accepted." In an instant the three who were at the training site with Izuku felt their blood run cold, but before they could say anything Izuku simply smiled and walked away with his team to get their assigned entrance. Across the arena, Bakugo and Cherry, who had formed a team with Kendo and Kirishima, felt a chill go up their spine. "Something wrong, you guys?" Aijiro asked, concerned, with the two staring at each other for a second before sighing and answering as once. "Izuku/Deku is going to do something, so get ready for hell." Line break. "Alright people, the 15 minutes are up and the teams are formed, so let's not waste any time. Midnight, if you would," Present Mike said with Midnight grinning in excitement. "Is everyone ready?" she asked with audience roaring in excitement. 3. Bakugo, Cherry and their team along with most of the other teams were staring at the castle intently, though Bakugo and Cherry couldn't shake their bad feeling. 2. Team Ida was nervous as they stared towards their right where the object of their hatred was positioned, and fearing both what he was planning and that they would be discovered as the reason why he did it. 1. Izuku simply stood there, his fingers raised and ready to snap, his team standing behind knowing what Izuku had planned and were simply waiting for the show to begin. Go. Snap. Almost instantly as the team started running, they instantly stopped, both by the sheer force and sound behind the snap and what appeared in front of them. The audience was stunned into silence, but before they could fully process what they were seeing and Present Mike could comment, the students screamed in fear as thousands of monsters appeared from the portals. Dragons, giants, ogres, undead, and countless other types appeared and glared at the 12 other teams. "Well, it looks like it's time for us to depart," Izuku commented, gaining all eyes and cameras onto him. "Now then, boys, we just gotta to cover two things before we begin. First, you're to stop any and all attempts of people entering all but my entrance to the castle in front of me. Second, while you're doing that, you are strictly forbidden from making it impossible for my classmates to make it into the castle, as well as give an injury that can't be healed within the next 2 days," Izuku ordered before looking towards Midnight. "Did I miss anything, Ms. Midnight?" he asked, with Midnight going over the rules again to find that he had covered all his bases. Gaining, she shot him a thumbs up. "And you're good to go," she declared, causing Izuku to grin. "Well then, come along my friends, we have a tournament to win," he declared as he and the rest of his team climbed the stairs and entered the castle, leaving 48 students and hundreds of glaring monsters alone. "So anyone else think this gonna be a really short sports festival?
Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.